Good morning. I'm John Quincy, and we're going to call to order the Ways and Means Budget Subcommittee agenda for this morning, October 2nd. We'll be having budget hearings. We haven't had in a few days, so it's good to get back into the rhythm here. We'll be starting off this morning with the Convention Center and Target Center. Meet Minneapolis is a co-presentation. Then we'll be followed by the Civil Rights Department, approximately 9:45, and then the Fire Department will be beginning about 10:15. So I'm joined today by Council members, Blong Yang and Abi Warsami, and Council member Lisa Goodman. Thank you for joining us. And I know other council members will be joining us quickly, but we're going to see if we can keep this thing on time. So I'm going to invite Ms. Christensen, if you had any opening comments, we're ready to go. So I'm going to invite Mr. Jeff Johnson up, our director of Minneapolis Convention Center.
Great. Thank you very much, Chair Quincy, council members. We are the Minneapolis Convention Center. You can find us on budget book pages F76 to F84. Want to introduce some people that are in the room. Mark Zerbel is our Director of Event Services. Chris Hundress is our Director of Business Administration, and I would like to especially thank her for putting this presentation together while she was away at a conference, so I appreciate that a lot. And Katie Smith is actually a Meet Minneapolis employee, but we try to say that she's ours. She's our Director of Sales and Marketing.
Very good.
Melvin Tennant and his staff is also here from Meet Minneapolis, but I will let him introduce his staff when it gets to his time. We're going to jump right in, and as you can see, this is our recommended budget program overview. There are 4 programs within the Minneapolis Convention Center. First program is the events program. Obviously, this is where we host all of the events and bring all of the economic activity to Minneapolis. This does include Meet Minneapolis and the funding for Meet Minneapolis. It also includes all of the operating revenues that we generate. And in 2015, we are projecting $17.4 million in operating revenue. That is a very aggressive goal. I just want to point that out. That is $1 million more than our highest level we have ever attained. So we are very bullish on the way the economy is coming back, the momentum that the hospitality community has, and we are pushing in order to bring in more revenue at the convention center. The rest of the revenues that come into the convention center are funded through the hospitality tax collection. So really, when we start talking about economic impact and economic contribution to the city, the convention center itself sustains 7,000 jobs in our community. The hospitality taxes that are directly attributable to the convention center are $16.7 million. And then in 2015, we are projecting an economic impact to our community of $405 million. We talk about enhancements. There are really very few enhancements that we are asking for this year. The one enhancement is through Meet Minneapolis, and I'm going to leave all the details to Melvin when he comes up because he's going to be presenting. But obviously, Meet Minneapolis is where the city invests in the sales and marketing for the city and specifically for the Minneapolis Convention Center. My only comment will be that a strong sales and marketing presence is very, very important to the success of the Minneapolis Convention Center. And Meet Minneapolis has had a great partnership with us, and we have some great successes that we'll be talking about as we go forward. So just a graph here to show you the economic impact. As you can see, we have greatly increased the economic impact that the city and the community sees from events at the convention center. Mainly this is because we're drawing in a lot more out-of-town visitors. 2014 was a great year, has been a great year. We look for that to dip just a little bit in 2015, but still a huge impact. Convention attendees spend a lot of money when they're in town. Again, revenue is a huge place that we are pushing as going forward. In 2013, that is our all-time record for operating revenue generated at the convention center. You can see that we have projected and on path to break that record in 2014, and then the aggressive goal that I mentioned earlier for our 2015 budget going forward. I truly do believe that the convention center is a key component and touches many pieces and so many parts of the city and can really help drive the success of our goals and values. And when you think about all the great living wage jobs that the convention center supports, also all the great community events that the convention center hosts, anything from the school choice fair to Project Homeless Connect, the Creative City Challenge art competition that we have on our plaza. Our goal is to be the best for our employees, our clients, and our community, and really impact the community through economic growth. And so we feel very strongly that we have a very key role to help the city grow. Second program that we have at the convention center is the facilities program. So this is the nuts and bolts. This is the 1.6 million square foot building that we operate every day. It is a large building. Sometimes we forget how many working parts it has to it. We have to continually keep reinvesting in the building in order to remain competitive. It is a very important part of what we do every single day. Starting back in 2012, we really went on a 10-year plan to touch every surface and every piece of infrastructure in the building to change it out as we remain open for business and still creating economic impact, but trying to make sure that we remain competitive and keep the building looking and operating efficiently. As we look at some of the measures, in 2010 we came forth with 3 goals that were really driving towards an end period time of 2015. The first one is our recycling goals. We had to make sure that we had a culture change in our organization about recycling. Our facility makes a huge impact. I've talked about that impact, but we want to make sure that the impacts that we make are positive. And so recycling and waste is very key for us. We set a very aggressive goal of recycling 75% of our waste by the year 2015. We are making huge strides towards that number. There's a lot of work to be done. This year, just some highlights of what we've been doing. This is the first year that we've been composting and collecting compost at the convention center. We introduced our quad sort receptacles in our public space. In 2015, we'll be focusing a lot on our back of house operational areas with new collection infrastructure and procedures, really trying to make it easy to do the right thing in the convention center for our staff and for our attendees so that we can get great recycling rates going forward. The 2 other areas that we looked at, the first is water. We wanted to make sure that we reduced the amount of water that we used by 50% by the year 2015. Again, we've made great strides towards that reduction and continue to do repair and maintenance projects and operational ideas to reduce that water usage. And then the third area was energy usage. We had a goal to reduce our energy by 10%. Right now we are at 8% reduction. As you can see, on 2013 we ran into, and I probably don't have to remind everyone of the rough winter that we had in 2013 and also the very hot summer that we had in 2013. And so that caused us to have a spike in energy. But we've spent a lot of time and effort focusing on electricity. So changing out a lot of our lighting has been a project that we've done over the last year and we'll continue to do for the next year. So we hope to see great reductions in energy usage through that also.
If I could just interrupt you just briefly here. I wonder if you could highlight a couple of the things that have been happening over the last year as we're talking about some of the capital improvements at the convention center that really direct towards those savings in utilities, bathrooms, et cetera.
Sure. Councilmember Quincy.
You mentioned the lighting.
We've replaced 32 restrooms in our facility, and that's not all of them, but that is a lot of restrooms. And everything that we replaced into the restroom was either an LED light, so it was more energy efficient, and also it was at least 50% more water efficient than what was there before. So that has been a huge help. Also in our exhibit halls, so almost 500,000 square feet of space, we've put in LED lighting. And so that was a huge electricity hog for us, the old lights that were in those spaces. So those are just 2 very large projects that we've done that have helped us towards these goals going forward.
Thank you. And of course, you have the solar array.
We have the solar array on top that produces about 5% of our electrical needs throughout the year.
Just wanted to remind members, we do have speaker management up if you'd like to join us that way, or if you need to interrupt and ask any questions, get my attention with your signal cards. Didn't mean to interrupt you. Go ahead. Oh, I'm sorry. Councilmember Glidden.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. And I just kind of wanted a check, since you were talking about the capital a little bit there. Is there a different slide where you're talking about the budget as relates to capital and your multi-year plan, or should I just ask that at the end?
Councilmember Glidden, Chair Quincy, there's not a particular slide that lists out all of the projects that we're doing, or that plan. There is on the budget, there is a budget numbers, but there's not an actual plan of over every year what we're doing. We do have those plans. We can send those to you. They're very detailed.
Yeah, and that's actually not so much what I'm interested in. This is maybe more a little bit of a question for finance as well as for the convention center, because now our sales tax dollars are allocated between multiple facilities, and we have not yet had a conversation with this council about that. And I guess what I would really like to see is an update probably each budget cycle on how we're doing within that plan. So when we saw this, and this relates to the Viking Stadium, mm-hmm. and the way that the legislature changed the ability of what the sales tax and other tax dollars can be allocated towards. And we have those prioritized between the Viking Stadium, Target Center, and Convention Center, with projections that should be sufficient. But it would be nice to see that, I would say, on a yearly basis, how we are doing with those projections, and are we still on task to meet our obligations to 3 large facilities that all have needs and are at different cycles of their lifespan.
Councilmember Glidden, Chair Quincy, I appreciate you bringing that up. In our finance plan, we have ample resources throughout the next 20 years, really, as I see it, to do a great job of keeping the building in great working order. Now, I know the finance plan isn't necessarily reality, because every year it can change, but we have the plan, and we are operationalizing the ability to do those projects. I tell you that it is challenging to do repair and maintenance projects while you're a very, very busy building, but we are doing a lot of work this year and accomplishing a lot as we go forward. So we feel good now, but every year we do need to check, and we need to make sure that we still have the funds available for us.
So this is maybe then a question to finance of, would we be able to see where we're at now that we're in, I don't know what you would call it, year 1, year 2? How do those, because I'm assuming we are checking those projections frequently, but at least on an annual basis, to review the adequacy of, because it's just a big estimate, of course, over many, many years.
Councilmember Glidden, we do have a monthly report that we receive and review, comparing to projections for current year, future years, as well as comparing to trends in the prior years, and we can certainly provide that information to you.
Okay, and it would be good to see it in relationship to our original plan and how our projections meet the needs of the 3 major facilities, and what additional revenue might be projected beyond meeting the needs of those 3 major facilities. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that, thank you, Councilmember. That was a great suggestion, something we've talked about internally, but we do need to put this into a process that we can actually review on a regular basis, what that would be and how that would be. I think this probably leads into Councilmember Johnson's question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I would agree and reiterate what Council Vice President Glidden has said. I think that would be very helpful. What I was curious about is, it looks like some accounting has changed related to revenues, and now we're going to have a transfer from the general fund, but I'm guessing that that's coming in off of sales tax revenue that's being added to the general fund. So I'm wondering, is the entirety of first, what is the transfer from the general fund? And then is all that money being transferred coming from sales tax revenue related to the convention center?
Councilmember Johnson, the amount of transfer for 2015 is recommended at $50.5 million. Beginning in, I believe it was 2013, we began crediting the proceeds from the local sales taxes into the general fund as a result of the change in the legislation that delinked, per se, the specific revenues from being used for a singular purpose. So with that, the local sales taxes are now being accounted for in the general fund with transfers to the convention center. Now, with the nature of general fund revenues, you know, one wouldn't necessarily say that it specifically is local sales taxes, but we make the correlation when we're calculating the amount that the transfer is necessary to support the operations of the convention center.
So we're expecting pretty much all of that $50.5 million to come from sales tax, even though obviously.
Correct. In the overview of the 2015 budget, there's approximately $70 million of local sales taxes, and $50 million is the budgeted transfer to the convention center.
Great, thank you.
Please continue.
All right, I'll continue. Again, just the goals and values. I've stated how I believe that the convention center very much impacts the goals and values, and the facility obviously does so also. The third program that we have is a very small program. It's the Talmadge program. The Talmadge building is a small building that we manage that is on our plaza area. Really what I would like to say here is that we've had some thoughts about what happens to and what does the Talmadge building become? How does it become more of a hospitality asset instead of just a office building? But also now with the new Nicollet Mall and with Westminster Presbyterian Church changing their campus, how do we relate to those areas, and what do we do going forward is sort of a discussion point that over the next couple of years I would really like to get into, because working the Talmadge building and having the Talmadge building be what it is right now is not going to have a future. And so going to that next step, I think, is a really important part of our growth and our connection to the city going forward.
Excuse me, Councilmember Glidden has a question, and then also Councilmember Goodman. So Vice President Glidden first.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So I was looking in the budget book here where it says that your plans are to, once the leases have expired with existing tenants, that you are going to repurpose this building into a visitor center and a restaurant. I was just kind of surprised to see that. I was wondering what kind of research told you that would be a good use of the Talmadge Center. Talmadge building, excuse me. I'm really familiar with that location and the building, and so I kind of question about how that's going to add value when it's so close to the actual convention center. And Meet Minneapolis is also talking about a separate location to act somewhat as a visitor center, I guess, for the general public, more in the center of downtown. So how are all these things being supported by research that says this will work and is a good use and is not going to make us subsidize this building?
Councilmember Gillen, Chair Quincy, we're really evolving on this right now. About 5 years ago, we had a study session, and as part of that study session to the council, we talked about a future for areas around the convention center, and the Talmadge building was part of that study session. And we talked about a visitor information center, a different hospitality on that area and how that connected to the plaza. I think even from when we put in our budget information this year, really thinking about and getting to see what the new Nicollet Mall is going to be, and getting to talk to Westminster Presbyterian Church and see what they're doing, that is changing and evolving some of the thoughts that I have, and we need to do more discussion and bring in more people to really talk about what the future holds. It may be something that is more hospitality related. It may be something that that helps with the connection to the Nicollet Mall. What we did find when we looked at the area around the convention center is that there is not a lot of hospitality very close. And so if we want to try to entice people to get out and explore, one thing that we can do is to make our plaza in that area more of an asset to get people to go out. It's one of the reasons that we have the Creative City Challenge, so that we have something out on the plaza that gets people to go outside and explore and understand that there's a different way to get around the city than to go through the Skyway system. And so, yes, in our budget book, it does specifically state a visitor information center. That could mean a lot of things. It could mean Segway tours, it could mean walking tours, it could mean other things, or it could mean what you traditionally would think of as a visitor information center. Also, at that time, wasn't very clear about what Meet Minneapolis was proposing for their visitor information center, so obviously we would not want to duplicate anything going forward. So it's still evolving. There is no clear direction at this point.
Maybe I could just, and I know Councilmember Goodman isn't here, but what's your target date for making decisions about this property?
Councilmember Gliddens, in my head, my hope is that our plaza area and the Talmadge and the connection then to the new Nicollet Mall is we have a plan so that in the summer of 2017, we can do some work out there so that we are prepared for what would happen during the Super Bowl experience. We would host the Super Bowl experience, NFL experience at the convention center. That would be a great time to be able to connect into the new Nicollet Mall in that area. And so we have a couple years to really vet through what the ideas would work and how that would be funded and where we would go from now.
Well, let others weigh in here.
Thanks. Councilmember Goodman.
I'll happily weigh in. I completely oppose this idea. I'm shocked to see it in the budget book, and I'm really surprised that no one mentioned this to me in advance of this hearing today. This is a building that my office and the mayor's office have been working to build affordable housing in for a number of years. The housing that we had proposed didn't come through, but that doesn't mean that we wouldn't take this asset that the city owns and determine what are our priorities. Is the city's priority to expand our hospitality empire, keep properties off of the tax rolls and compete with the private sector? Or is our priority to do what we do, which is build affordable housing or work with partners to build affordable housing or do something that's more job creation focused? We do not need to be competing with the private sector in the restaurant rental market industry. If we think this is something that can't be affordable housing, then we should sell the building, keep the money, and do something else with the money. We don't need to be the owners of the Talmadge building, and a plan to transition it from office to affordable housing could create that sale and put it on the tax rolls. I cannot even believe that this is coming up in the budget book. There was a plan for Westminster to work with Mortensen to put affordable housing in this building when they tore down 95 units of SRO housing on their site for a surface parking lot last year, but when they were told by the city we wouldn't fund it, they determined they wanted to back off. That doesn't mean we wouldn't turn around and take this building in the heart of a very affluent area, I would note, downtown, and turn that into affordable housing. So I'm completely opposed to this idea. If we're going to do a visitor center that belongs on Nicollet Mall and not in this location, and I would just urge my colleagues to seriously take a look at this. This should not have come up as a budget item, but as a policy item about how we dispose of property within the city.
I think we have a lot more conversations to happen along that. We're going to let you, unless there's other questions, let you continue on with the presentation.
Great. I'm going to skip ahead a couple and just show again our operating investment. We've been working very hard to try to get our operating investment from hospitality taxes as low as possible, with a goal by 2015 to get that number down to $8 million. We've had great success. One of the challenges that we are running into right now is that as we become a busier building, our expenses rise at a faster rate than our revenues come in. And so that's why I've been talking a lot about how we really push to get more revenues into the building so that, again, we can keep this operating investment as low as possible going forward. But know that $1 invested in all of these MCC programs returns $12.67 to our community. So it's a very good investment for the city to make. We had mentioned the Target Center, and I'll spend, this is our third program area. We also, as a convention center staff, oversee the management of the contract the city has with AEG to manage the operations of the Target Center. We also perform all of the capital improvements and will be involved in the upcoming Target Center renovation. This budget number is about $14 million. $5 million of that is for the capital improvements. $7.5 million is for the debt service, and $1.5 million goes to operator reimbursement. Again, Target Center is a great hospitality asset to have for the city and meets many of the city goals in many different ways. I want to talk a little bit about how we are doing. 2014 has been a pretty incredible year for the Convention Center. We've received a lot of great accolades. We won a worldwide industry award from our association, the International Association of Venue Management, as the top convention center in the world this year, which was very humbling for all of the hard work that our staff has done going forward. I talked about recycling, and we're making some real progress there. We're at 56% recycling rate through the second quarter of this year. Again, not where we want to be, but we're working hard to make that work going forward. And this year, we received certification from the Green Meetings Council. We are one of 6 buildings in the entire world that is certified for our sustainability practices. And so we're very proud of what we're doing. And I would just say to you that you can know that the Minneapolis Convention Center is recognized worldwide as a fantastic building, and you have a world-class convention center in your city. That happens, one, because of the facility, but mostly because of the people that we have. And we have worked very, very hard over the last few years to change our culture and improve our culture at the Convention Center. And we are starting to see some of those rewards. Some of the ways that we're seeing that not only is it just in employee engagement, but also in some of the surveys that we're doing and some of the information that we're getting back from our surveys. Especially our culture survey, we saw significant improvements in our culture survey this year. In the city's engagement survey, we saw increased participation, which is a key role because we want to hear from everyone. There were some positives, there are some opportunities, but we will continue to put a lot of effort going forward in our people and making sure that they have the skills and everything to make a great impact. From a customer standpoint, obviously we must listen to our customers and we have to react to their needs and wants. And so we have been working hard. I did talk a little bit about the repair and maintenance projects that we are doing, and we are getting great responses from our customers on the items that we have changed and the items that we are currently changing, which is really important because we want them to want to come back to the convention center, but also we have to inconvenience them while they're here right now because we have construction going on around the building. And so to get them to buy into that future look is very, very important because we do inconvenience them while they're here for the short term. From a financial standpoint, I've talked a lot about that and what we're trying to do. I would just say that this year in July, we had our second highest revenue month in our history. I call that out because it's very rare for us to have a high revenue month in the summer months. Generally, we're having those high revenue months in March when we have all of our public shows. So this was an extraordinary July for the hospitality community and the convention center. Economic impact, again, we are providing huge economic impact to the community and have already achieved $367 million in economic impact through quarter number 2. From a community standpoint, I feel very strongly that the community needs to feel like the convention center is part of their community and they have access to it. And so we have a program where we are enabling 10 community groups. We have enabled 10 community groups this year to come into the convention center and use our space when they most likely could not have afforded it otherwise. And so this is a way, again, to get people into the building and using it that are part of our community. Also, the Creative City Challenge, the art competition. We've had many different events this summer to really activate the plaza area, and we've seen people from the community and people from the surrounding neighborhoods coming with their kids to have fun on the Convention Center Plaza. It's not something that we have done before in the past.
Excuse me, Mr. Johnson, were you going to interrupt before you make the next slide? And I think, is it Councilmember Fry that needed a question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you go to the previous slide, the 2014 impact goals,
Yep.
How are we doing? So it says financial impact, contain our operating investment, operating expenses minus operating revenue to 8.7 million. Does that mean contain the loss to 8.7 million?
Subsidy.
Councilmember Fry, Councilmember Quincy, so in years past, we've called this a subsidy. And that is the amount of expenses minus the amount of revenue that the convention center brings in. There is a gap there. It is an investment that the city makes. So for this $8 million, we're returning $405 million in economic impact. If you go back to the previous slides, we are bringing in 17, or proposing in 2015, we'll have about $17.5 million in operating revenue. Our expenses will be around $25 million. Also in a previous
Can you
slide.
just say that last sentence with all those numbers again? Just
Yep. So in 2015, we are projecting that our operating revenue, so the rents, the commissions, all the charges that we are able to get from our clients in the convention center, we're projecting that to be $17.5 million. Our expenses are between $25 and $26 million going forward. The previous slide also said that you can directly attribute hospitality tax that comes into the city from the convention center at about $16 million. And so it is hard to quantify. Yes, there is an operating subsidy, but if you look at economic impact, if you look at the hospitality taxes that come into the city and those that are directly attributable to the convention center, there is money coming in to pay for the operation of the convention center. It just might not be in our operating revenue.
So if you take the $450 million worth of monies generated for the city as a whole out, and we just look at the tax revenue generated versus the $8.7 million loss, what is that? So what was the taxes generated again?
So, Councilmember Fry, again, there's all the hospitality taxes. I think some people call them sales taxes. I'm going to call them the hospitality taxes because that's how they were initially put forth from the state. All of those taxes that come into the city are about $70 million. The general fund now collects all of those taxes and is transferring over $50.5 million to help operate the convention center. That pays for our debt, that pays for Meet Minneapolis, that pays for any of our repair and maintenance or capital, and then that pays for this operating subsidy or operating investment of around $8 million.
So wasn't there, okay, so I was looking at it right here. So you said 70 million, what's this, I have some looking at 16 million here. So this is hospitality taxes directly attributable to MCC activities generated as 16 million. What's the 70 million?
70 million is all of the taxes that were previously before the stadium legislation, previously dedicated to the convention center.
Okay, so would it be a correct conclusion to draw that it's an $8 million loss without looking at the taxes generated? If you include the taxes generated per year, we're looking at, I mean, you could argue it would be an $8 million gain. Would that, I mean, I think that would be a better argument than, am I missing this?
It's showing up as an operating subsidy, but Ms. Christensen, can you help us point out where that detail might be?
Sure, Councilmember Quincy, I refer the members of the Budget Subcommittee to page E6 in your budget book, if you have it available, which lays out specifically the history of the actual receipt of the local sales and hospitality taxes, and specifically to your question, Councilmember Fry, of the a portion of the $50 million transfer from the general fund, as Mr. Johnson indicated, is budgeted for $50 million in 2015. $8.7 million of that is to cover the gap between the operating revenues and expenses. The remaining portion is for other future capital and so on and so forth. So there is, if one were to look at the prior year financial plans, there would show actually a gain in the convention center activities because the collection of the hospitality taxes exceeded that which was necessary for the subsidy.
Thank you, I understand.
Thank you. We got Council President Johnson, Councilmember Glidden is passing, and Councilmember Bender. So if we could go with Council President.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm for my colleagues who are understanding this very complicated financing mechanism for the first time. I appreciate the the questions and the information from both Mr. Johnson and Ms. Christensen. And this is a really complicated industry in that this 70 million, Councilmember Johnson and I were just talking, the 70 million that's generated is generated from a number of taxes some across the city and then some in specific areas related to the convention center. Councilmember Johnson had a question, Mr. Johnson. What were the convention center revenues last year? So revenues obtained from food and beverage, from rentals, that sort of thing in the convention center last year? And but he also wants to figure out what percentage of the 70 million generated is generated because of convention center activity. And I know we've talked about that before, and that's a very difficult number to discern.
Council President Johnson, Chair Quincy, the slide that I have up right now shows the actual operating revenues, what we get from our clients when they come into our building. Again, in 2013, that was the highest operating revenue number that we've ever achieved at the convention center in our history. We can attribute of all of it is very difficult. We can attribute of all of the hospitality taxes that come in, that about $16.7 million of that is directly attributable to what we do. That is a guess in some ways. I'm assuming that it's much more than that, but that is directly attributable. We do talk about economic impact, and again, that is a very kind of fluffy number, but it is a very important number because we have research that shows that when an attendee flies in from another city and comes to Minneapolis, they spend over $1,000 in our community, and that's how we get that number of over $400 million. And so when they go to a restaurant and they spend their money and the taxes are collected, there's nothing that tells us that they were here because of the convention center. We would love if they would push a button that says, I'm here for the convention center, please calculate these taxes and give them to the convention center. That's not how it happens. But we do know, and there is solid research, that they spend over $1,000 when they're in town.
Thank you. And I would just also mention to my colleagues that Mr. Johnson has done a remarkable job of getting this subsidy. And I would suggest that you use the word subsidy because, people talk about taxes as investments also, and it's kind of a canard a little bit, So it is a subsidy. The convention center is a loss leader. It brings people into our community. Used to work in the first jobs I had, I worked in a grocery store. Grocery stores put out ads. They lose money when they sell eggs for 99 cents, but it gets you into the store. The convention center is a loss leader, but Mr. Johnson has taken what was almost, I think, at times we had a $20 million subsidy, did we not? What was the highest number we had?
I believe 16 or 17 was the highest.
All right, I'm exaggerating then. But anyway, he's done a great job of getting those expenses down, so thank you.
Yeah, and that's a combination of expense controls as well as revenue generation.
Yep.
That's a remarkable thing that we should be pointing to is the subsidy drop over the years to its lowest point of 8.7. Councilmember Bender, did you have your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to clarify if that $8.7 million includes things like the $500,000 enhancement piece.
Councilmember Bender, Councilmember Quincy, it's just our operating, so it does not include that money. It does not include our debt payments, our payments to Meet Minneapolis, or the repair and maintenance capital payments.
So it doesn't include any of the events program budget, for example?
Councilmember Bender, it does include portions of that. There are it's kind of hard to explain, but the events program is made up of a lot of things, and operating revenue is one piece of the events program. Another piece of the events program is the Meet Minneapolis budget, the money that we send to Meet Minneapolis. But from an operating standpoint, what I've tried to do is, as we look at this subsidy, and I say subsidy, but I don't want to say loss, because I think that is the wrong word to use. It is a subsidy. That subsidy is really about how we operate the building. Can we control our expenses, and can we drive our revenues? And so for me, it has always been a litmus test for our staff to say, are we doing a good job? And so for me, it's how I bring this forward to you to say we are doing a good job. We're driving that down. We're trying to get it to what we believe, after going and doing some research, is a number that, if you looked across the country, would be a number that many convention centers would strive to get to.
Okay, thank you. That's helpful. I do think it would be helpful to see some more of those details. The events obviously are a significant investment as well, 24 million almost, plus an additional $500,000 being requested. So I just want to understand a bit more how that breaks down, whether that's in the operating budget or an additional piece. So if you could send that after today, that would be helpful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. I know we're running short on time, and we haven't gotten to our friends at Meet Minneapolis yet. So I wondered how you wanted to proceed.
I can kind of blow through the last ones and just give a quick, really from an operational standpoint, our budget for the convention center, we're asking for a 2.3% increase, knowing that 64% of our budget is fixed, and driving down again towards that $8 million subsidy goal. From a revenue standpoint, again, pushing to bring in a 9% increase of operating revenues. We'll have at least 366 events next year, and that will bring in what we project to be $405 million in economic impact. All right, I will bring my friend Melvin Tennant up to talk about his piece of the budget.
As we go to this transition, I think we may have one final question from Councilmember Yang.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have two questions. Mr. Johnson, you talked about recycling, reduction, water use of LED lights, and all those improvements. And is there a dollar figure on that?
Councilmember Year, Chair Quincy, on what we've invested or what we've saved?
What we've saved.
What we've saved. Again, that's a hard thing to quantify. I think some of the things, we have a $250,000 rebate from Xcel Energy. We have, as I've shown, an 8% reduction in our energy use. And so there is not a number for what we've saved. It's a hard number to come up with because rates change, and our utility bills are extremely complicated. So we try to go by what the energy used and the savings there.
Okay. And, you know, Councilmember Bender mentioned the one-time enhancements of $500,000. And wondering, I mean, the marketing, events, and community engagement, I mean, how is some of that different from what Meet Minneapolis does, and why is that justifiable?
Councilmember Yang, Chair Quincy, that's what Melvin is going to talk about right now, because that $500,000 enhancement is for Meet Minneapolis itself, and so it's part of what they are requesting through the convention center's events program, and so he'll go into detail about that.
Thank you.
Mr. Tennant.
Good morning, Chair Quincy, members of the committee. If you would allow me to introduce our team members who are here this morning quickly, who've joined us. Amy Alegi, who runs our marketing department. We've heard Katie Smith, who's Director of Sales and Marketing at the Convention Center, Meet Minneapolis team member. Madonna Carr runs our services program. Brent Forrester, all of our destination sales. Scott Romaine, Sports Minneapolis. Dave Knoll, Finance and Administration. Bill D, Tourism and International Relations. Anybody else work at Minneapolis that I'm not aware of? Well, quickly, I wanted to just get into our presentation, realizing that we're running a little short of time, but I wanted to repeat two words that Jeff mentioned during his presentation. Those two words are partnership and momentum, and I think those are very applicable to the relationship that we have with the convention center and hence with the city. So let me first of all jump right in and give you a quick overview, things that you probably already know about our mission, vision, and values at Meet Minneapolis and how we're set up functionally departmentally. We're happy to get you more detail about that, but that is the very high-level overview of how we're organized at Meet Minneapolis. So getting into the budget program for Meet Minneapolis for 2015, you see the comparative numbers for 2014 to 2015 in our various departments. Wanted to call your attention to a couple of things that might draw your eye. In our sales area, the 2015 amount shows a reduction, but that's actually because we did have a one-time investment from the city of $750,000 in this year's budget that is not being repeated. Also in tourism, you'll see that there's an increase, but that is relative to the proposed visitor center at Nicollet and Fifth. Wanted to make you aware of, we've had these discussions about an initial budget request that we made that we feel very strongly about, and obviously the city was not in a position to fund that overall program, but the components of the program I think are very valid and ones that we still stand on. The awareness building is certainly something that helps us to do our jobs and to sell the destination more effectively. We find very consistently that customers that actually come in and experience the destination are more likely to buy and to bring events and meetings here. Convention Support Fund, we, as a course of doing business, as just a fact of life, we do have to provide incentives for groups to come and utilize our facilities in the city. We've talked about the visitor center and all the impact that it will have, particularly in terms of being able to expose visitors to our neighborhoods and not just the downtown assets. Sports Minneapolis, particularly in the area of our amateur and youth sports, that's an area of our sales and marketing that is often considered to be recession-proof. An expanded welcome program to make sure that our visitors who come here feel very welcome and want to very likely come back and visit us again. I want to spend just a quick moment on how Meet Minneapolis and the hospitality industry's work really relates to the city's values and goals. And as you can see, we have, as it relates to the industry, Meet Minneapolis and Sports Minneapolis, we feel as though each and every one of the goals and values are touched by the activity that we do. For example, through our CSR programs that we've initiated, and I will talk about that a little bit more later, we've seen growth in jobs in the hospitality sector, particularly a very diverse workforce. The economic impact of visitor spending continues to grow. Obviously, city tax collections in hospitality taxes continue to grow. Again, we feel as though every single city value and goal is touched by the hospitality industry. Now, looking at some of the success we've had over the last 5 years, and we chose the last 5 years because that is the term of our current contract. We wanted to give you a snapshot of some of the things that have happened during that period of time. As you can see, growth in both hospitality jobs, lodging tax revenue. Hotel occupancy did show a dip because of the recession. We'll get into more detail about that in just a moment. A very stellar fact is the metro-wide visitors that has increased by 2010 to 25 million, and we're forecasting a $34 million number by 2015. Convention center revenue, Jeff talked about that. Meet Minneapolis sales team is responsible for working with Jeff's team to generate that revenue, so we have that revenue goal as one of our key performance indicators, and that continues to grow. In our private sector revenue, I think that's very important. Chair Quincy, you've spoken to us often about what the private sector generates relative to the city's investment in Meet Minneapolis, and we continue to see that particular number grow, and we have great hopes for that. It will continue to grow and support our efforts.
Go ahead. Thank you.
Looking at some quick highlights of the last 5 years, we did initiate a corporate social responsibility, CSR Central, during the MPI, Meeting Professionals International Convention, that was here this August. It will serve as a template for future conventions that are coming in to have a branded program that will allow convention delegates to give back to our community. Of course, the All-Star Game, very involved in that. The Super Bowl 52 that's coming in 2018, very involved in that. The American Choral Directors Association, a convention you may not have heard of, but we worked very closely with Vocal Essence and Philip Brunel, and that's an example of working with the local community to bring conventions here. We thought that was very important. And under the leadership of Bill Deef, our Sister Cities program continues to grow. With 11 cities, there's discussion of a 12th city, and that program, I think, has been very well received, and we appreciate the opportunity to be able to run that on behalf of the city. The Marry Me in Minneapolis campaign that really highlighted the amendment that was passed, and also the fact that then Mayor Ryback was the face of the campaign. We did a number of sales and marketing initiatives that really helped to highlight that for Minneapolis. Hospitality training, making sure that our hospitality community is well prepared to welcome visitors in the highest possible way. The American Legion Convention, it has now been here, I believe, 3 times now. Is that correct? And it's coming back in 2018. So again, another opportunity for us to have an ongoing relationship with a major national convention. And I want to spend just a moment actually in the next slide on hotel room absorption. So just in short, this slide shows that from 2006 to 2013, we had an increase in rooms in our community, in Minneapolis specifically, of over 19%. But in spite of a dip in occupancy in 2009 and 10, we have exceeded our record levels of occupancy as of last year, and we're on track to actually exceed that number for this year in spite of having many new hotel rooms in our inventory to sell. And in fact, this summer, June, July, and August were all-time record months for hotel occupancy and revenues. Taking a look at our KPIs. We missed a slide there. We'll skip over to leisure room nights. The leisure room night goal is, this is non-convention center group room nights, so one of our KPIs continues to grow, and we wanted to just make you aware of that as one of our 4 KPIs. The convention center revenue, we've talked about that. That continues to grow. The number proposed for next year is $17.5 million, $1 million increase. And our private sector revenue, this is what I mentioned earlier, that continues to grow. We've not set a goal for 2015 yet, but we feel very strongly that that number will increase over 2014 levels. Coming up, 2015, just a few highlights I wanted to bring your attention to. We're hosting the Society of Government Meeting Planners, a convention of government meeting planners, as the name implies, but that's important because that's a sector that we continue to pursue for the city in terms of future meetings, and getting that group of customers here is very important in terms of encouraging them to make decisions to bring their events here. The Sister Cities International Conference is coming here. Again, Bill Deef has been running that program, and with our sales department, we're able to secure that event here for next year. Very excited about that. National Senior Games for athletes 50 years of age and over can participate in any number of sports. We're expecting probably about 15,000 athletes and family members during next summer. The Railway Interchange, it's a collaboration of 4 different railway associations. We've hosted that event once in 2011, and we actually have 2 future years secured for 2015 and also for 2019. Looking forward to that. The Global Climate Summit, Club de Madrid, we are looking at having 40 to 60 former heads of state here, and so we look forward to having that high-profile event here in our city. And another major event is the National Association of Black Journalists. So we've been working on that for a number of years. So we're sort of in the home stretch now in terms of what we're looking to propose for next year. Just to call your attention again to the fact that although we can't do these 5 particular initiatives to the extent that we would like to, although we do feel as though there would be a tremendous return on investment, we do want you to know that we're very focused on growing and marketing a vibrant 24-hour city, increasing leisure visitors, increasing convention and event room nights, increasing our brand awareness, and also driving earned media in our digital presence. And so what we're proposing with the additional $500,000 that's been noted in the budget is a campaign, an annual campaign that will include these components. integrated marketing and public relations in key domestic visitor markets. In the leisure side, we look at cities that are within the 500-mile radius. So those are the cities where we get most of our visitors. So we're going to focus on those markets. Also, international sales missions. We have a tremendous asset in our airport, and it allows access to visitors from all over the world. We want to make sure that we exploit that. We're going to launch an aggressive diversity and inclusion campaign. We think that it's important for us to reflect the community in all of our marketing initiatives. Also, targeted sales initiatives in the association and government convention market. I mentioned the Society of Government Meeting Planners. And these are all incremental activities, things that we're not able to currently do within our existing budget. What we're proposing is that under this campaign, utilizing these $500,000 in one set of initiatives, we'll come back a year from now to be able to show you what those results have been and to prove that there has been a tremendous and verifiable return on investment on that particular campaign. So in conclusion, we've been a partner with the city for more than 25 years, and we will continue to represent the city to the best of our ability by increasing visitor count, also tax revenues, jobs in the hospitality sector. I think you've seen how we propose that those will be growing. And of course, we'll continue to work hard to make Minneapolis the destination of choice. So, Mr. Chairman.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Tennant. It's rather unusual that a separate nonprofit organization would be before us today, but I think that just demonstrates the partnership between Meet Minneapolis and the City of Minneapolis. It's great synergy that's lasted a long time. I'd like to, of course, point out that 5 years ago, as we were initially talking about getting together as part of the budget process, we really strengthened that relationship and made things accountable through a KPI that was mentioned several times during your presentation. It's important for us as a city to make sure our investments are paying back and being measured, and that's what those KPIs were set up for. So thank you for your work on that, and thank you for all of your staff and your contributions, especially for focusing on selling the convention center, our highest priority.
Yes, sir.
Are there other questions? It looks like Councilmember Goodman, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Melvin, thank you for giving us an outline of the $500,000 and how you would spend it. It's better than us directing you how to spend it. I'm wondering if you can compare those 4 points to the 5 areas that you had originally asked for an increase in, just so I get a sense of what fits where. Like, for example, integrated marketing and public relations campaigns in key domestic visitors markets. Mm-hmm. Is that under awareness?
Awareness,
building?
Yes.
Because obviously there's not any money for building out this capital request and subsidies for, you call it the convention support program, I'd call it subsidies to bring conventions here. Can you just fill me in on how these fit with these requests so we have a really good sense of what the expectation is going to happen and what is not going to happen?
Looking at the 5 initiatives, as you see in this campaign, Councilmember Goodman, we don't have the visitor center in this particular proposed campaign. We feel very strongly about the visitor center, and we feel as though we can make other adjustments in our existing budget to make the visitor center a reality. So we removed it from the campaign for the $500,000. We felt like the $500,000 needed to be directly related to enhancing our marketability as a city. So you see brand awareness in there. You see the targeted trade shows in there. Those are all direct sales initiatives. And as far as they relate to the 5 components of the building our future, I'll just get to that in just a second. The Convention Support Fund is not specifically in there, of course. The Visitor Information Center is not in the $500,000 specific campaign. Sports Minneapolis would be a part of that because bringing sports marketing executives here to take a look at the city for future events would be a part of that. An expanded welcome program, I think not exactly in that $500,000 campaign, but I think much of that could be embedded within what we propose to do to still fund the Visitor Center initiative. So not a direct correlation, but we took it and really tried to make it focused on enhancing our marketability as a city.
Okay. Mr. Chair, Mr. Tennant, I really appreciate you kind of just outlining how you would spend it and urge us to trust that they know what they're doing in terms of spending it and have us not say, well, we'd rather have them do this or that. But it sounds like sales and marketing seems to be the best bang for the buck, and I appreciate the way it's been outlined.
Thank you.
Thank you for that. Other questions? Councilmember Frye, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Carter, you may have already gone over this, but the price that we're getting the visitor center space for is, for all intents and purposes, free, right?
Yes, so working with CenterPoint Energy, a tremendous partnership that we've been able to forge, so the actual rent is free. There are some pass-through expenses that we would have to pay, and of course, staffing, and we do, because of the city's requirement to have retail in that particular spot, we'll have retail, and so we're still evaluating whether we would handle the retail directly or through a partner. So free rent and a very, very minimal cost, which makes this a very affordable option for us to really get the word out about our great city.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Thank you very much, Mr. Tennant.
Thank you.
Thank you for your staff, and Mr. Johnson for your great work and presentation. Thank you very much. We'll go to the next group, which is civil rights, and it looks like we may have lost our civil rights folks due to the time delay, but we'll hope to have some easy transition here, and we'll get to that momentarily.
Good morning, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Corbel, I assume you're going to be giving this presentation, so.
Good morning, Mr. Chair and committee members. We just had a little technical thing that we had to work out.
I didn't want you to give the Meet Minneapolis or Target Center presentation, so I'm glad we got this one up.
My name is Velma Corbel. I'm the director in the Department of Civil Rights. And thank you for hearing our 2015 budget proposal this morning. I'd first like to start with just a quick overview of the department's organization. For your information, there are 22 employees in the department on a regular full-time basis. We do supplement the staff of 22 with law clerks and interns as needed for special projects. And the staff in the Civil Rights Department support 2 boards and commissions, and then the Police Conduct Review Panel. The Minneapolis Commission on Civil Rights is a mayor and council appointed body of 21 individuals, and the Police Conduct Review Panel and the Police Conduct Commission are community appointed individuals, 7 in each entity. Right now we are going through an open appointment process for all of these entities. And so I just use this opportunity for those who might be monitoring, watching, or listening, that the application process is open. And so we invite people to join us.
Excuse me, Ms. Corbel, I just wanted to point out to my colleagues that we're on page F133 of the actual budget book, if anybody was needing that reference item.
Just an overview of our spending for the proposed budget 2015 in the 4 divisions of complaint investigations, contract compliance, the Office of Police Conduct Review, and employment equity. The breakdown is as follows: a little over $500,000 in general fund funding and complaint investigations, and resources from a work share agreement that the department or that the division has with the U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission that creates some additional revenue for us in the contract compliance division. I call your attention to that line because there are a couple of points that need to be explained. If you happen to have last year's budget book or last year's budget in front of you and you look at the general fund number for contract compliance, it looks like a significant increase, but that is where the finance department this year has located all of our internal service charges. So it's about $846,000 that has that's landed in that program. Of course, over the next year, that will be distributed through the programs as necessary. The Contract Compliance Division also receives grant funding through the Community Development Block Grant of $335,000 proposed this year. There are some additional requests in the proposal for contract compliance this year. $300,000 for a disparity study, and you know that the disparity study is the evidence that shows that that the city can continue to have its municipal race and gender-based municipal contracting programs. Also, a request for $100,000 for an additional FTE for contract compliance that goes right in line with the numbers of construction permits, almost $1 billion that we've talked about over the last several years. And we've asked for an additional FTE to assist with some of the compliance monitoring that has created by that growth. The Office of Police Conduct Review, $590,475, and the Employment Equity Division, $433,841. The Employment Equity Division is where the Urban Scholars Program resides, and the majority of the resources, just about half of the resources in the Employment Equity Division go to support the wages for the urban scholars as well as the other program components, the leadership development, Toastmasters, et cetera, that are the parts of that program. Again, this is about a $3.7 million budget for this upcoming year.
Excuse me, Ms. Corbel, we have comments from Council President Johnson and then Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Ms. Corbel. Thank you, Mr. Chair, Ms. Corbel. $300,000 for a disparity study. How long do we have to do that every so often? What's the push time-wise?
Mr. Chair and Council President, the best practices indicates that a disparity study should be done about every 5 or 6 years. The last one that we did came in 2010 for the purchasing years of 2005 through 2007. So the data that was actually analyzed for the previous disparity study was already somewhat dated. And so according to the best practices now, we're hoping to implement a new disparity study beginning in 2015.
Last time we did a disparity study, we shared the cost with Hennepin County. Have we approached that kind of partnership at all?
Mr. Chair, Council President, when I got here, there was no partnership agreement in place with Hennepin County. The disparity study cost the city about $500,000. And Hennepin County did not share any of that cost.
Did we approached them about it, though?
We may have. That would have happened
Okay.
before I came to the
Okay.
city,
Okay.
but there was no shared cost.
Okay, okay, all right. Thank you.
No, you would think we spent the $500,000 for a disparity study back in 2010, and the question might be, then why isn't it more expensive to do a new disparity study in 2015? And part of the reason that disparity study was so expensive in 2010 is because there was massive data collection that needed to be done, and there were no systems in place at the time to be able to do that. The city actually ended up paying the consultant a substantial amount of money to help in that data collection, and that was just the costs that were captured as part of the contract for the disparity study. It did not capture all of the costs associated with staff time and other individuals that came in from time to time into the Civil Rights Department to help with the data collection. Since the last disparity study, we have put some systems in place so that we are maintaining that data on a consistent basis, and that we wouldn't have that same degree of data collection by an outside firm, because we've been doing it ourselves in-house.
Having said that, though, if our data is up to date, why do we need to spend $300,000?
Mr. Chair, Council President, it's not that the data has to be up to date. It's actually the analysis of whether or not we have the rationale for having a race-based or gender-based program. And one of the reasons that a company that is skilled in conducting these kinds of studies is required to do it is because you don't find that capacity or that level of skill inside organizations to be able to do it. And we're trying to hire someone that has the reputation, the skill to do the analysis, the reputation of doing the analysis, and someone whose work is regarded as being the quality of work we need to support the program. So there are some things that come along with this as well. So for the last disparity study, we used the National Economic Research Association. Not only did they conduct the study, but they were also prepared to join with us if any element of our small and underutilized business program were ever challenged. So they would become the expert testifiers in an action if one were to be brought against us. But there are not very many of these kinds of organizations across the country that are doing this amount of work, because the analysis includes looking at Dun & Bradstreet, looking at purchasing trends in the city, taking an immense amount of data and analyzing that to really create the rationale for a race-based or gender-based study that is not necessarily immune, but certainly a barrier to challenges to programs that are often targeted for being unconstitutional.
Thank you.
Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With regards to the study, you'd said that it's recommended every 5 to 10 years. Is that right?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, the best practices would indicate that you would do one every 5 to 6 years.
Okay.
And we have approached that almost at that 6-year mark.
Okay, and let me ask this. So this disparity study that we last did in, I think, around 2010, what did we learn from that? And, what recommendations did we, or what did we implement from that?
Mr. Chair and Councilmember Yang, we learned a few things which created the underpinnings of the existing small and underutilized business program that is currently ongoing in the city, as well as has been used for goal setting on certain types of projects and contracts in the city, where we want to make sure that we're including women and minority businesses. One of the things that we learned is that there is ongoing discrimination in the marketplace with regards to how women and minority firms are used on city purchasing. But what we also learned is even if the city did everything that was in the recommendations, it still would not be enough to undo decades of discrimination against women and minority firms in this region. So the city's disparity study really provided the evidence for us to do our part. But that means that Hennepin County, the Metropolitan Council, the cities, the Airports Commission, all the other government agencies that have these race and gender-based procurement programs would have to do just as much to be able to make an impact in the community that we want to make. So some of the recommendations that came out of the original disparity study, and I'll just give you the few that come right off the top of my head, was that we would rewrite our small and underutilized business program, which we did. One of the recommendations was that we would use a certification that would withstand the strict scrutiny that's required by all of the case law that has been directed towards these kinds of programs. So we moved from using the CERT certification, which was not would not withstand that strict scrutiny as the certification standard that we use now. We moved to the Minnesota Unified Certification Standard used by the MnDOT, the Met Council, and the Airports Commission, and the city is also part of that collaborative. It recommended that we identify some things that we would do in terms of technical assistance to our women and minority business community, which are not necessarily things that reside inside the Civil Rights Department, so it informed other departments on some things that they can do. So in the Community Planning and Economic Development Department, the Business Technical Assistance Program is one of the results of that recommendation. It recommended for us to unbundle certain large projects and contracts to create opportunities for smaller businesses with the less capacity to bid on those high dollar contracts that gave them the ability to be able to bid on smaller dollar amount procurements. So there were a number of recommendations from the disparity study that the city has implemented over the last several years. One of the recommendations was also that the city would consider creating a target market program, which isn't a race and gender-based program, it's actually a race and gender-neutral program. And several departments in the city, as well as some of the council members here today, have actually been reviewing an ordinance that's been drafted to perhaps create a target market program. But again, that is under consideration.
And, with regards to these recommendations that have been implemented, have we measured their successes so far?
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, we have and measure their success on an ongoing basis. So we have, we track the goal setting that is done on contracts, and we create reports on where we are with the status of the goal setting. I have a slide in the presentation here that we'll get to in a little bit that talks about that. With regards to unbundling contracts, some of the departments that are involved in that the most, Public Works, CPED, and the Convention Center, are certainly can provide some good anecdotal information about what's happening with that. But again, these are ongoing types of programs. Have we made improvements in the percentages of inclusion of women and minority firms? Yes, we have, frankly, and I'll share that with you here in a later slide. But it is, equity is always a work in progress, and that's what these programs do.
And let me ask this, the $300,000 for this new disparity study, is it going to be with the same firm?
We will, Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, we will issue an RFP, just like we do with all other professional technical services contracts, and would select a vendor from that process.
We don't have the in-house capacity to do it then, I imagine.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Yang, that capacity does not exist in the city. Frankly, the capacity does not exist in any agency that has this sort of program. And it probably would be not looked upon favorably if the city itself conducted its own disparity study, because there should be some degree of separation in doing the study and implementing the results. So it's not a best practice to have an agency do its own.
Thank you. Councilmember Andrew Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was just curious if you could give us a little more detail on the employment equity program names, since there are 2 FTEs and $433,000. I'm assuming there's more to the program, maybe some other stuff. I was just looking for details.
Mr. Chair, Councilmember Johnson, yes, the Employment Equity Division does have the wages and benefits and internal service, training, development, that sort of thing for 2 employees. But this is also the program that contains the resources for the urban scholars.
Oh, okay, great.
And so all of the salaries for the urban scholars, the cost of their leadership development program, the Shannon Leadership Academy, the Toastmasters program that they each participate in, is also in this program.
Thank you. Continue. I'm sorry, Councilmember or President Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Ms. Corbell, now, when you were talking about the recommendations from the other disparity report, you mentioned, and I apologize because I just heard the last part of your remarks, that we're involved in a collaborative with other agencies, and you mentioned MnDOT, I think. Yeah, MnDOT. And my understanding is that we've shifted from well, explain this to me, I guess is what I'm trying to figure out, because there's different standards for different groups, and I just am hearing this from people that have been visiting with me, and I want to understand why we're in the mix with MnDOT instead of being, again, in the mix with Hennepin County and St. Paul.
Mr. Chair and Council President, again, that was a recommendation from the 2010 disparity study that we move to a stricter certification than the one that we were using. And the primary reason for going into the collaborative with the Met Council, the Metropolitan Airports Commission, and the Minnesota Department of Transportation is because they use a certification standard that has been vetted at the federal level and also through the court systems for a certification of small women and minority-owned firms. It's called the Disadvantaged Business Enterprise Program. So that certification standard has already been tried and tested and works. And many states, well, all states and many municipalities are using that certification standard. And so we are part of that collaborative. And the reason we moved away from the certification with Hennepin County. That includes Hennepin County, the school district, St. Paul, and one other, is because those entities were not using their certifications to set race and gender goals. They were using their certifications just as a small business program, and it did not meet the strict scrutiny that was required by the courts to address the constitutionality of a race and gender-based program.
Thank you. Helpful.
Page 3.
So the Complaint Investigations Division, very quickly, the primary goals of that division to handle complaints. We oversee an alternative dispute resolution program or mediation program, and we do a lot of connecting with law schools, universities, and nonprofit organizations, both for outreach, but also to recruit interns and law clerks into the department and onto our boards and commissions. Key measures in the Complaint Investigations Division that we want to highlight. This is, I don't want to keep repeating the same thing over and over again, but the division has worked really hard over the last several years to decrease the amount of time it takes to conduct a complaint investigation, and the line chart shows that. It also shows the number of work share cases, cross share cases with the department and the federal U.S. Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. This line graph on the left of the page, on the average time to determination, I would point out that the staff in that division have worked really hard and are very proud of the fact that not only have they decreased the time to investigate a complaint, but they've also redefined the definition of what a backlog is. Most people are familiar that a case backlog is anything over a year old. That's typically what enforcement agencies would use. But the staff in this department have become very efficient in how they do their work, and have actually redefined the backlog to go from a 12-month standard to a 9-month standard for backlog definition. Links to goals and values, very quickly, the Complaint Investigations Division, Living Well in Minneapolis, and I've identified the values for equity, safety, and vitality. The Contract Compliance Division, main purpose to monitor construction, employment training goals, prevailing wage, affirmative action, et cetera. They review contractor good faith efforts to make sure that they are meeting the goals that are set. The division oversees a small and underutilized business program, and also is on the leading edge of implementing a city supplier diversity program, which is a similar program as a small and underutilized business program, except it is for the city's direct purchases, not subcontracting, which is what the small and underutilized business program is, but it's for the city's direct purchasing, especially around a dollar amount of $50,000 and below. The Contract Compliance Division, as I talked about earlier, the enhancements or the additional requests this year are additional FTE for compliance monitoring and the $300,000 for the disparity study. Key measures in the Contract Compliance Division. This slide's been updated for the first and second quarters of 2014. And you will note the workforce inclusion performance, the goals that the city adopted along with every other agency in the state, because the State Human Rights Department actually sets the goal of 32% minority and 6% female. We are tracking right about 19%, which is not inconsistent from where other programs in the region are tracking. There are certain projects that are meeting and exceeding the goal, but as an average, we're right about 18%. And then with the women inclusion on the workforce, close to 6%, which is actually quite an improvement over the last time I think we talked about this, because I think last year we were tracking right around 4%. So we've been very intentional about getting more women into the construction workforce. Then on the minority and women business inclusion side, the goals from the 2010 disparity study are 25% combined goal for women and minority business inclusion, and for the first and second quarters of 2014, we're looking right around 21%.
If I could interrupt and call on Council President Johnson for a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Corbell, and forgive me for my ignorance, but I met with a constituent, actually a woman in the construction trades, and we were chatting, and one of the things she asked me, and I honestly didn't know the answer, when we do our goals for, say, a construction project, do we call out what percentage we want in particular apprenticeship, journeyman, that kind of thing? Do we do that?
Mr. Chair, Council President, no, we do not. We did that years ago because there used to be a category for skilled and unskilled. And after conversations with the unions, it was really difficult to distinguish between what's skilled and what's unskilled. Because if you're working on a construction site, typically you're going to have some level of skill. And so the goal for both women and minorities went to just a single goal, for 32 for minorities, 6 for women. So we don't track by trade, we just track by gender for the women on the project. But one of the things that we do with our larger construction projects especially, we require a certain amount of apprenticeship hours. And so when a construction and development project is being planned, the Community Planning and Economic Development Department actually will work with us and identify an amount of apprenticeship hours that should be on a project. So we do that.
Okay. Her point was that if you don't, if you don't quantify that you're perhaps not reaching the target market, that bringing people in at the bottom end, that kind of thing. And her particular thing was city residents. That if you're just pulling tradespeople in, you're getting people from Monticello and the whole shebang, and we're not. And the city residents would be perhaps more in the apprenticeship area. So anyway,
Mr. Chair, Council President Johnson. On our larger construction projects, we're also asking now for zip code hiring for these contractors to be hiring by zip code. We're not setting goals on the zip code, but we're tracking the number of construction workers that are coming out of Minneapolis. And so we'll have some data going forward to be able to determine whether or not a goal setting is actually appropriate for that.
Ms. Corbell, is that for all projects or projects of a certain size, or only if it has city investment in it?
Mr. Chair, it's for projects of a certain size. So we right now created a large project equity plan requirement for zip code hiring. So it's for projects over $10 million. Okay. And the reason we've done that is because those larger projects are typically the ones that have the greatest scopes of work and the opportunity for people to participate. The Contract Compliance Division is linked to the city goals and values, hub for economic activity in a city that works, and then our values in that division that we're most connected with are equity, vitality, and growth. In the Office of Police Conduct Review, this division, whose primary purpose is to receive and handle allegations of police misconduct. The allegations are either investigated or sent to the precincts for coach. The investigations from a review panel are sent to the police chief for appropriate handling. And we also, in the Office of Police Conduct Review, provide a summary of the case data via the police to the Police Conduct Oversight Commission, because it's that group that by ordinance have the responsibility of doing outreach and engagement, but also doing research and study on particular policies and procedures that might have been violated in order to make recommendations back to the police chief on best practices or recommendations for changes. Key measures in the Office of Police Conduct Review. These are two representations of data and information that is actually published quarter by the Office of Police Conduct Review. This is the information as of June 30th for numbers of allegations by type, and then the actual results of what happens with the case assessment and resolution. And so you can see here that in quarters 1 and quarter 2, the inappropriate language. This is a cumulative report as well. So we didn't get 175 allegations of inappropriate language in 2 quarters. So if you look at the legend, this is a cumulative report from when we first started tracking the data back in 2012. So you can see that inappropriate language and violations of the policies and procedures still track as the largest categories where people are filing complaints, but certainly there are others that are significant as well. Some of these inappropriate language, what are the sort of less egregious kinds of complaints, no physical contact is made between a police officer and a complainant. A lot of these are referred to the precincts for coaching. And I have a later slide in the presentation that talks about one of the successes or one of the things that the Police Conduct Commission is proud to report is the success of the coaching process to date. And we'll talk about that in a bit. The Police Conduct Reviews links to city goals and values, living well in a city that works, equity, safety, and connectedness. The Employment Equity Division, we've talked a lot about the Employment Equity Division already this morning, but it's our division that focuses on eliminating racial disparities. It's the partnership division between the city and other metropolitan efforts to create equity in the region. It's also the division that houses our Urban Scholars Program. And then it's also the division where subject matter expertise resides that works very closely with the city coordinator's office, CPED, and other departments, HR in particular, on the racial equity tools. Key measures in the Employment Equity Division. The slide that probably most represents the work in employment equity is the slide of the city demographics, about 23% people of color shown in this slide, and then our Urban Scholars Program, which is over 90% people of color, and it's this leadership development program bringing college students of color into the city to prepare them for jobs in the public sector, hopefully in the city in the future as vacancies occur within the city workforce, because our goal here is that over time, the city's workforce will be reflective of the community that we serve. And in the legend here under the photograph of the Urban Scholars, we talk about, is this program being successful? And it is. And of the 12 Urban Scholars that have gone through the program that have graduated, we're hiring them in the city, 8 here in the city, 8 full-time, 2 part-time, 1 in a nonprofit, and then what the rest of them are doing. So this program is having success. The links to goals and values in the Employment Equity Division, one Minneapolis, a city that works, and the values of equity and vitality. How's the department doing? One of the things that we did when this question was asked, this is probably a new representation of this information from previous budget presentations that I've done, but the leadership took the opportunity to ask the employees, what do they want the city council to know about the work that they're doing? And the employees provided us some feedback on the things that they want to talk about, and they want to talk about in the Complaint Investigations Division, the level of outreach that they've done over the last year to reach more than 250,000 people through their outreach events, media, social media, et cetera. They are very proud of the streamlined case processing to redefine the backlog, and then the work that that division and staff did on really coordinating the 50th anniversary of the Civil Rights Act celebrations over this past summer. The Contract Compliance Division wanted to certainly call your attention to this collaboration that is ongoing with their partner departments in the city more than ever before. One of the reasons we are seeing this incremental success in the numbers of women and minority businesses on city-funded projects and the numbers of women and minority employees on these job sites is because of the partnerships and collaborations between staff in the Civil Rights Department, Contract Compliance Division, and our partners in the other departments. And staff wanted to make sure that that was recognized. And they also have done quite a bit of outreach to the community because they talk to people about the how to be certified or purchasing and contracting opportunities, and about equity in general. And so they wanted me to call attention to that. In the Office of Police Conduct Review, I asked for 3 or 4 things that they were most proud of. They gave me a list of 10. So I tried to gel it down into really what they're proud of is their efficiency in case processing, the coaching, the fact that they've implemented a brand new civilian oversight entity in the city of Minneapolis with a partnership with the police department. The complaint investigations and the Office of Police Conduct Review, both are complaint handling entities, really wanted me to emphasize how proud they are of the casework that they do, because they realize that whether it's somebody got called out of their name, or whether it's someone who didn't get paid appropriately, or if it's someone perhaps from the transgender community who isn't feeling safe in their neighborhood, the complaints that they handle really is the most compelling reason that these folks come to work, because they know they're creating a better quality of life for people in the city through the work that they're doing. In the Employment Equity Division, they were most proud of the success of Urban Scholars' 3-year-old program, third summer, the growth and the success, the inclusion of other organizations in this program is something that we are all actually, frankly, very proud of. But it really is two people in a division that have done this. And then raising the discourse on the conversation around equity and racial equity. Again, the budget is in the budget book. You have it there. The committee chair identified the pages that it's on, the breakdown of the 2015 budget compared to 2014. So the numbers there are pretty self-explanatory. 22 FTEs, additional one would raise it to 23. It's straightforward, nothing really controversial or major. Changes in expenditures between 2014 and 2015, again, $3.3 million proposed budget. The new requests are shown there, $300,000 for the disparity study, $100,000 for the FTE, and then these additional incremental changes in the cost increases of just general operations.
If I could ask Council President Johnson, did you have a comment, question?
I just really appreciate it, and I think it's great that you asked your staff what they were the most proud about, and I think that's really important that people feel like they've got a successful outcomes. And I want to thank you for that lovely picture of the Urban Scholars, because I just think that's the kind of information that when you make an investment like that, it's an investment that shows success. And that's, to me, one of the things that we have to judge as a city is where, if you put your money in something, where do you get the biggest bang for your buck? And I mean, to me, see those young people and have them be successful in our city is the best answer we could have. So thank you.
Thank you. Couldn't agree more. There's great successes in all of those department success stories, and it becomes from an investment, making change, and then making that change implemented. It's terrific.
Thank you.
Do you have any other final comments? Or
I don't. I just take whatever questions are remaining.
are there any other questions from our colleagues? I'm not seeing any. Thank you, Ms. Corbo, for your great presentation and for all the great work of the staff.
And some of my staff are here today, so.
Oh, yeah. Tell them to get back to their offices. I think we have a couple of minutes. We might be able to take a quick break if anybody needed it, and we'll invite the fire department in, and we'll begin at 10:45. Sorry to delay the process, but I appreciate the brief break and the easy transition. So I see a lot of white shirts here, and I think we'll begin our fire department budget presentation. So if we could invite the chief, Friedel, to the podium.
Thank you, Chairman.
Begin it. Go.
Quincy, appreciate that. Committee members, if I wouldn't mind, I would like to take just a minute and introduce some of the folks that are here, my staff that are here. To my left, I've got, in the first chair, I've got Assistant Chief Chuck Brenison. Morning. Deputy Chief of Training. There's always, I always think there could be a resemblance of brother and sister between Councilmember Glidden and John.
Wow.
I think there's always that resemblance here, brother, sister. I think.
I can tell the difference.
And next we have Deputy Chief Mike Dickinson, Deputy Chief Ray Cruz, Deputy Chief Don Leadham, our HRG Beth Toll, Melanie Rucker, who is our Deputy Chief of Personnel, and of course I'd like to welcome Union President Mark Lukoski, Acting Chief 3 today, Joe Madison, and Tom Clark, and of course my right-hand person, my Finance Director. We're here today.
Yeah, make sure Luke stays near you for this.
Thank you. I appreciate it very much. Obviously, our budget book pages are on F-156 through F-165. Starting out with the department organizational chart and based sort of on the missions that we have in the department, obviously is led by the fire chief, and I am the fire chief, John Friedel. I'm proud to say that I am the chief of the Minneapolis Fire Department. We pretty much have two critical missions, and one is sort of a shared mission with the response and minimize loss of fire and/or to minimize the loss of property, life, property, environment, and impact to the environment. Also on the right side of that page is promote prevention, community risk reduction. That has taken on a much bigger role in our department this year with the promotion, prevention, and community risk reduction. I think it's a role I need to put more resources towards. It's very challenging for us, but it's something that we can, and I'll show you later on, that we think may have a lot of impact in the community and making a much safer place for our folks to live. And then, of course, the Fire Inspection Services Division, which is, as you all know, is housed in regulatory services. It is, our fire marshal is dual reporting to the fire chief and also to the director of regulatory services, which obviously we all know what they do. We do provide some familiarization inspections in support of their mission and regulatory services. We have primarily a quick program overview, three programs: fire suppression, EMS technical rescue, training and recruitment, and community outreach and reduction. As we go through these slides, I'll be talking about each one of those programs. We do have an enhancement of roughly $850,000 to those programs, and I'll be talking about the impact those enhancements may have. In program one, fire suppression, EMS medical services technical rescue describes the increased demand for services by cross-trained personnel who perform multiple functions in a growing range of services. And those services obviously include EMS response, fire response, hazardous materials, technical rescue, and prevention education. And these actually, and we talk about the suppression, EMS, and the technical rescue piece, the operational side of what we do. This is where I think the fire service across the country is really starting to change. I think that, we have to start looking at, I as a fire chief have to look at going forward, what is a sustainable response model and what does that look like, not only for this year, for next year, but years moving forward. I think as we're going to see in future slides that it's the EMS side of our business has become very, very challenging to us. And so this is one area of a program that's going to be it's going to be challenging to identify an effective response model that's going to work not only today but in the future. I think it's something that we really need to take a very, very, very close look at, which I'll get into later on in future slides. In terms of the enhancement of that program, we had a $50,000 enhancement in one-time resources for continuing development and implementation of outreach to high school and alternative hiring processes focused on inner city youth. I do want to spend some time talking about this. We have already implemented this program. It is something I am very, very excited about. I think that In our recruitment and retention and looking forward in past testing we've done, we have looked at why we haven't been able to really, in my opinion, effectively achieve the numbers we want to achieve in terms of diversity in this department. We have a very diverse department, but it's also very challenging to maintain those numbers. I think where we have probably missed the boat a little bit is focusing on inner city youth and giving them an opportunity to have a choice or make a choice and potentially think about a career in the fire service and or even in the medical field. And so we've started the program. We've got 13 seniors right now in the high school program. And I'm hoping that I can take some of these people, nurture them along, not after they graduate, forget about them, and to allow them to continue in the process of at some point becoming a firefighter, continue that program where they can continue their training and provide the conduit to become, quite frankly, a firefighter in Minneapolis. Now, I do know that some of these kids probably aren't going to be firefighters. So they're going to realize that maybe I want to be a paramedic, maybe I want to be a nurse, maybe I want to be a physician, or maybe I just want to work for the city. So I think it's this kind of a program that we can act as a conduit. So if a young man or woman decides that they may not want necessarily be a firefighter, we can direct them down a path to maybe work in regulatory services, to work in inspections, work somewhere in the city, because we are one of the biggest employers in this area, in the city. And so I think it's important for us to look at our youth, to focus on the youth. That's why I've started the program in September. We are going to continue it, and we'll continue the next year, and we'll be starting at the junior in high school level, so junior and seniors will be in some form of this program. I don't know what the end of that pipeline may look like. We'll probably start out with a drip out the end of it, but hopefully that drip will turn into something that is really sustainable and that we can create opportunities that and really catch the inner city youth before they get themselves in position when they make that bad decision and they make a mistake or make a decision that affects the rest of their lives. So I'm committed to that. I think it's important, and we are going to continue to support that.
Thank you. Interrupt you if I could for Councilmember Glidden.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I know I've heard a bit about the program, and I just had a couple follow-up questions about this. So one is the program kind of like an internship or something? Or because I know you said you're identifying a certain number of high school students, 13, and then is it like an internship, or what is actually the program?
Being that this was sort of the first year out of the game, we have been talking about this for a year, and we met with the city schools, and it's run out at the present time out of Roosevelt High School. And because of the requirements that the schools required us to start the program, we weren't sure how that was all going to look. So the kids sort of, signed up for the program before we had an opportunity to go out and recruit. Oh. And, so I'll be very honest, I think I need to tell you the story. We walked in the first day of class here in early September, late August actually, and here these 13 kids, in walks the fire chief and others, and they're looking at me like, what is he doing here? And I said, I think I'm here to change your lives. And that's what I told them. And they all kind of they gave me that look, and then we started to explaining it. So as we go forward, now we will the program will evolve. We'll be able to start recruiting for next year. We've already told these youth, talk to your friends about this program and what this means to you, and develop some more interest. We like to keep the class size around 15 students if we can, because it's just a way it's a manageable amount, but we will start probably 15 or 20 in the juniors, and that will continue into the senior level. So we just keep that feeder program sort of working throughout that. Now, once they graduate, I would, working in conjunction with the Local 82, we are going to, and I'll talk about it later, we're going to also start an Explorer program. So together we will continue that training process even after they graduate. Now, they will graduate as EMTs, so they could potentially have a certification that would allow them to earn a livable wage out of high school, and as an EMT. And that's one of the requirements that we have. So that's one of the first requirements that we would get out of the way as far as becoming a firefighter. Then there are other training that we will continue to nurture and grow them. Is a senior in high school just graduating the appropriate age to become a firefighter? I don't think so. But it gives us an opportunity to take these kids as youth, to nurture them, to grow them, to mentor them. And even if they choose not to continue that career, I think we can make a difference in their lives. And that's some hope. And I know the firefighters want to get involved with that. And so I think it's just a very unique opportunity at that level. And that's what I talk about at the end of this. Hopefully I'll be able to graduate them once they complete their training and become certified firefighter, to hire them right on the rank of firefighter.
Okay, well, thank you, because another question I was going to ask was about EMT, and so I didn't understand they were going to come out of the program with that certification. So, because I know there's a lot of talk about the EMT and kind of that as part of the pathway to firefighter. And then, so maybe my last question then is maybe just 2 sentences on what you think this Explorer program is. Is that something comparable to the CSO and the police officers, or?
I would say yes. It's very comparable to that. Our Explorer program, I'll talk about a little bit briefly now. It's beginning between ages of 14 and 21 are going to be in the program. So I'm hoping that the Explorer program can help feed the high school program and can all help to just build that ladder. At the same time, the kids that are in the program will be earning some college credit towards the class they're taking, so they'll be working towards a degree, whether fire science degree or in terms of EMT will count towards the fire science degree credits while they're in high school. So I think there's a lot of upside that they can, if they want to achieve and commit themselves a little bit, that they will be able to enjoy and reap some of the benefits of that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
As you look at some of our result measures that we had,
Sorry, Chief, if I could. I missed Council President Johnson had a comment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Chief. So I guess my question would be, and we've chatted about this, that you've got to, when you have a test, you have this extraordinary number of people that want to take the test and pass the test and that sort of thing, and that that's a challenge for continuing diversity in our department. Do you need, how do I want to say it? So when you have these young people that are interested, they're trained EMT, to get them into taking the test, do you need a legislative change, or is that a contract change that you would need to create that kind of entry point into the department that would be different than the typical applicant?
Okay, Committee Chair, Councilmember Johnson, what we will do, we will actually create or conduct an alternative hiring, and we will be able to hire right to set these prerequisites and do an alternative way of hiring right to the rank of firefighter. Okay. So once they've completed their training and they've become certified firefighters and their state requirements they need to meet, which we can fulfill within this program, then I will, one thing that's be required, we will have to rank them. So if we have a group of 15, it may require some kind of a ranking model, which may be interview, maybe some kind of a written time, but we do have to effectively rank them, but then we can hire directly to the rank of firefighter. And we'd have to work with HR, with the HRG, working through the process of making that. We've already had those discussions to thinking ahead of we are going to be to that point where we will have to have that process to be able to open up that conduit to allow them to come on the fire department.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Some of our measures that we use in results, if you look at, you can look at total emergency calls by type, and there are a number of types, in terms of EMS and fire, and you can look at the numbers that we have, and they are been increasing throughout the years. Through the second quarter of 2014, we were at 20,000, over 20,000 runs in the second quarter. I am going to project that we are going to be in excess of 40,000 runs this year, 40,000 calls for service. Our service is just continually starting to go up, and if you look at the chart, a lot of it is in our EMS services. That as our population ages, as this city starts to change and continue to evolve, I think just our demand from services is going to continue to grow, and that's one of the challenges that we have, and that's where all of these things that I'm trying to do with these different programs, high school programs, can help assist, and what that new response model might look like in the future to address some of the demands and needs that we're going to have. That's why it's very important that we continue to look at that. The neighborhood maps that we have.
I'm sorry, Councilmember Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. If you could actually go back 2
Yes.
slides. So I know your number of calls are increasing, and if I look at this, it looks to me, just eyeballing it over time, we're actually getting further and further away from meeting our goal. So, and then also that map you just had up, I see quite a few neighborhoods where we are in the red, failing to arrive anywhere on, even from 0 to 50% of the time. So less than 50% of the time meeting our goal. So what's it going to take for us to meet our goal and get to 90% of the time that we're responding to events in 5 minutes or less?
If we, and that is challenging for us in 5 minutes or less, and that's a standard, it's an NFPA standard that talks to first unit there within 5 minutes or less. It doesn't necessarily mean fire truck, could be the fire chief, whoever is first responding vehicle there. That is a challenging for us to get to our borders within that timeline, because it's just hard to get to. When you get to lakes area, it's hard to get around the lakes. It's challenging. If you get far northeast, it's challenging because there's just not a lot of good one-ways. We haven't got the Park Avenues of Portland's and a lot of the main thoroughfares going to 35W going up through northeast Minneapolis. Our far corners in the city make it very, very challenging to meet those standards. Now, there are certainly fewer runs in those areas than we do in our core, where we have a lot of our runs. You can see our map is very green. We do an effective job of responding to the areas that we have a large majority of our responses. But that doesn't mean those areas that are in red aren't any less important. This entire city is very, very important to me. And so we look at positioning rigs and positioning stations, and when we have these harsh winters that we have, when we have construction season that we have around this city, it all has impact. So time of day, traffic, construction, time of year, winters where we have one-side street parking, can't get down streets, that all has an impact in 5 minutes or less. So there's a lot of things, a lot of variables that come into that. To help address some of that, I just had a discussion yesterday with the chief of St. Louis Park Fire, because I am concerned about our western side of the city and some of the red areas that are on that map. And we're having discussions about how we could help each other out in those areas by, we would send our normal response, but they would maybe also send one of their rigs on their companies from their side to assist us on our borders. We had that same discussion with Chief Butler in St. Paul. We have in our eastern borders, we have those same challenging areas where they challenge themselves to get to. We have a challenging time getting there ourselves in within 5 minutes. So by cultivating a mutual aid agreement where we would maybe have auto aid or at least mutual aid in some of those areas would hopefully help improve our response times in those areas. And I think it's the best way for us to share resources. I know that I'd love to have a fire station in every corner. I know that I can't. And that certainly would solve a lot of problems, but we can't. But I think that there are ways that we can work together with our partners to help address those issues.
Great. And then I don't want to jump too far ahead, but I was just wondering if it looks like a click request for a new fire station number 11. Is that an existing station, or are you trying to set up a new station, and would that help with these response times at all?
That's Station 11. That's part of our CLIC process, and that is in the queue from CLIC to be replaced. That will be actually moved from its present location, which is in, quite frankly, a residential area with cul-de-sacs and stuff, to make it very challenging to get out of it. So we'll be in a better position, a little bit farther east. Will be a newer station that will actually, to be honest with you, our fire trucks will fit into. That was one of our first fire stations back early 1900s, where it was our training division. We had very narrow doors. Well, the horses have gone away, and now we've got big fire trucks, and they don't fit well in these older. They were a great old station, a lot of history in those, but the modern day fire service, they are very challenging. So moving this will not only better position us in that part of Minneapolis, but also give us a new facility.
Thank you.
Moving on to our next program, which is correction. I'll talk a little briefly about goals and values, and I know there's a goal and value slide in every one of these, behind every one of these programs, and I'm going to talk about the first one and a breeze through the other two. because the more I think about this department and the service that we provide the community, that I think we fit very nicely and we achieve a lot of the goals and values that this city wants us to do. I think if we just look at equity and safety and health and vitality and connectedness and growth, you know, when I look at community outreach, when I think about safety, what we provide for fire protection, EMS protection, when I look at the equity, when I look at things we're doing with the high school program and reaching out to the inner city youth and identifying, giving those kids an opportunity, and the EMS piece in terms of health, and when people feel safe in their communities, I think that means a lot. Health safety means development. People feel safe that they can come into a community and they can start to invest. If they feel unsafe, if an investor feels that it could be an unsafe investment, it's going to be challenging for them to spend the money. I think a lot of what we do fits in very nicely to the goals and values and we certainly try to conduct ourselves in that manner. So I think that moving on to our training and recruitment, obviously very, very important. You know, we recruit and develop a high-performing, diverse workforce where personal strengths are recognized and individual differences are respected. You know, that has always been, that's one thing that's unique about this department. We have a culture in the fire service. We actually have 19 different families. And they're a very diverse group of families, and it's like having a second family. Sometimes I feel like the father up in the upstairs that has to go out and take care of the kids some days. But it's a very unique environment. It's a very unique culture. And we have gone through all the challenges when you have to work through individual differences, and we understand where we recognize those, respect those, and we certainly value all of the strengths that all of these people bring to this organization, as I think is reflected in my staff. They are very, very effective, and I think when you start to address some of those issues and do an effective job of recruitment and training, this is what you end up with at the end of it. You end up with a very diverse staff that is, I think, reflects a lot of what this city looks like, and I think that's very, very important. We have received in enhancements $400,000 in one-time funding to enhance ongoing training and recruitment activities. That is an approximate figure of what it costs us to train and pay for a class. The training costs are very, very expensive. But that is approximately what that's going to help us meet that demand. And the bottom, we've got $400,000 in ongoing funding, but provides a class of trainees every year for attrition protection. That has been, the attrition issue has been a real concern and a real management problem for us. At the beginning of the year, we were, in terms of sworn personnel, and total staffing of the fire department was 413. 406 of those are actually sworn personnel. At the beginning of the year, we were at 388 firefighters. I dropped down to a low of 376 firefighters in July of this year, which certainly has presented its challenges for me to effectively staff our apparatus. That 376 does not include where we're running today. I've got anywhere between 20 and 26 people off injured right now today, which brings us down into the 350s that I'm staffing the department with today, which certainly has, it creates an overtime challenge that we have to deal with. And it's just one thing that managing has been very, very challenging for us to have the appropriate depth in the department to meet the challenges as we move forward. And that is going to be, and I think it's my responsibility as the fire chief to address those challenges and make recommendation to committee and to council that would be effective to ensure that we can maintain a sustainable response model that makes sense for this city as it starts to evolve. As one of the charts, we've had the any questions?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I think we do have a question.
Okay.
We've got Councilmember Yang in queue, and then followed by Andrew Johnson.
Okay.
Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, some questions for you. You know, with regards to the overtime expenditure, Where is that listed on F-163? Is it under salaries or is it benefits or? And how much is it?
How much is it? We're probably projecting overtime this year to approximately 1.4 or 1.7 million.
Okay, and since I'm new here, is that typical for a year or is that pretty high, low? Where is it at?
That is, in my opinion, that is high.
Okay. And, I'm looking at the staffing numbers here and, from 2012 of 392, we're up to 413 in 2013, and we don't see any changes this year. And, I'm just going to ask you, in your professional judgment, are we staffed adequately for the population that we have here?
I think that we need to consider, based on what I think a lot of us realize that this city is evolving. I think if you just look at downtown, the core of the circle around downtown, for example, we're probably at 30 to 38,000 people. We're projected to be, who knows, 50, 60, 70,000 people over the next few years. That is going to present a challenge. I've got one fire station downtown, one engine one, and it's one fire apparatus that I consider my downtown engine company. I do have a station by the convention center, but as far as a true downtown station, we don't have an effective right now true downtown. Now it is in the queue to be replaced, but it's those kinds of I suppose how I would define them as challenges that I need to look at as a fire chief and say, not only where I'm going to be next year in 2015, I'm looking way down, where am I going to be in 2024? Where is this department going to be? I might not be here. Well, I probably won't be here in 2024, but we need to set this in a position where we can make it effective for the future. And that's why I would, in terms of depth today, I think we need to have more depth in our department. I don't have the depth right now to handle to take care of the impact of injuries. And when we stay, and there's a direct correlation, as staffing come down, our injuries have gone up. People are doing more. When you look at one of our fire trucks, we have 4 positions in each of our fire trucks. Each of those positions have specific duties that have been assigned to that position that need to be completed on a fire scene. Well, when one of those are down a little bit, now that duties that are assigned to that position have to be done by somebody else. So we are doing more work on the fire scenes and even on EMS scenes that certainly tax our folks, and we're having more injuries. We're getting more injuries just in lifting EMS patients. I've got a number of injuries, so we don't have the depth to cover that. It's as soon as I have something to go off, it immediately goes right to overtime. I just don't have that depth, and that is what's challenging. Is that fine balance of overtime dollars, overtime savings, and where is that button at? You can kind of balance that scale, and that's what's a little bit challenged to identify where that number is.
So with regards to that balance, though, I don't want to get you in trouble, but I want to ask this. Just in terms of staffing, though, what's an adequate number that would get us to that nice balance where we're not spending too much on overtime, we have adequate staffing so that we can account for the injuries that are there. Those sorts of things. What is a good number?
I think in my 3 years as a fire chief, I don't know if I've ever given a number. I've always talked about the depth of the organization. Right now, we're at 406. I would say that does not, in my opinion, in my professional opinion, my recommendation to committee chair and the committee member, I would say that we need to be deeper. I've talked about 418, which is on my workforce plan. It's in my plan here, and that's just a goal. It's just a recommendation. It's a goal. It's right around 418, and that would be a minimum level where I'd like to be able to use that as our stabilizing platform or level, so to speak, and attrit up and down through that line of 418, which that one chart shows. But that also is over a period of time where we have that gradual growth to meet the needs and demands of service that are going to be required in this organization as this city starts to evolve and grow. We all know that's going to be at 400,000 people in this city very, very quickly. And
we've hit that number already, though.
And maybe we already have or there beyond. We are probably there, and it's starting to show now in our demand of service. It is starting, and I think that I need to think about making recommendations to council and the committee that would meet those challenges that I think that I can see coming.
So what I'm hearing you say is that, I mean, if we increase the numbers, what happens is that we lower the cost for overtime, and we make up for, or we might lower the cost for, or the number of injuries that might happen because we could fill those in. Is that what you're saying?
Committee Chair, Councilmember Yang, I would agree that and it would be actually my goal would be to try to minimize, absolutely minimize non-contractual overtime. Because I think there are some savings that can be realized if we can lower that overtime. There's some savings that certainly can be realized. And if we can get it down to levels that are more in line, that make more sense, then right now we're out of balance. And I think we can bring that into balance. There is some natural savings that we will certainly be able to realize within budget on the personnel side. And those could be applied too and help offset any additional, potentially any additional funding of positions. So that's why you see the growth of this. I do see that we need to react. We need to be nimble enough to react as we move forward to address the challenges that we're going to have. We just have to be able to be in that position. Not that I'm going to be able to achieve that, but it's something as a chief and as a leader of this organization, I think that I need to bring to before council and committee.
Thank you.
Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a few questions for you. I'm looking at first off, the retirement timeline. So we'll have cumulative in 2015 of 61 folks. And I'm looking at, in January 15, we'll have 403 sworn staff. And so when you account for 20 hires in March, we go up to 417, but then we're back to 411 by January of 2016. So if I do my math right, that would mean that we have only 12 of the 61 folks retiring. Is that do you feel that that's an accurate projection of those 61 staff eligible for retirement?
Committee Chair, Councilmember Johnson, that is what I'm trying to show here, that even with, as aggressive as sometimes this might look, when you look at a chart, you go, it looks like it's a little bit aggressive. We've pretty much tried to follow the same model over the years. We've been predicting we're going to have, and it's come to fruition where we've had these times of month. Now we could. It's so difficult for us to predict that in terms of our numbers. That's what happened this year. We started out at 388 before I had the first class actually on the back seat of the fire apparatus. We were down to 376. We attrited that quickly, so the attrition comes out very quickly, and it takes months for us to train and get them ready to come on the job. So it's just constant battle, and we're planning. We have a class of recruits in training right now. Before this class of recruits, it's a class of 13. Before these, which will bring us to 406.
So was 45 for this year? Was that what we were originally projecting? Because I'm just wondering if we dropped, or if we had 12 folks retire in the first 2 quarters of this year, and we were expecting 45 retirements, wouldn't we be expecting significantly more next year than 12?
That is the unknown. We just, Committee Chair and Councilmember Johnson, I'll be honest, we've had folks walk in our office at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. It's my last day, I'm retiring. And we've had some say, I'm going to retire in June. So it's hard for us to predict class size, because I could say, well, I could hire 30 firefighters in a class and we'll be good. Well, if we don't have that expected attrition, now I'm way out of balance my personnel costs. I am just way out of balance. So it's just this targeting that, and these are just sort of assumptions that we have worked with staff to try to put together some sort of a workforce plan that makes sense, but allows some flexibility, some room to attrit up and down and try to level us out versus having these big spikes. As I've spoke to before in front of committee and in front of council, we created an attrition bubble years ago. We did it to ourselves in the middle 80s. We hired very large classes of 30, 25, and now that attrition bubble is coming down the pipe, and all of a sudden now we're down to 2014, 2015, and now they're all leaving. And if they all could potentially leave, That's why I think it's important for us to try to break that chain by hiring smaller classes of 10 to 15 more often to try to flatten that out and to a point where we don't create an issue for the next chief down the road 15, 20 years from now.
Sure. I just have two other questions for you. One, with our goal that you set at 418, does that factor in, does that account for the 20 to 26 individuals who are injured? You know what I'm saying? I mean, are we setting that goal knowing that there's going to be injured firefighters, and so we're making sure we're accounting for that so that we're able to safely staff?
Committee Chair, Councilmember Johnson, that I would say that those folks that are injured are part of the 418 because there again we can't predict injuries either. So one day, you know, if we do get a little healthy, and I would hope that we do get healthy, some of these folks get over, and we've had a lot of major injuries that have required surgeries, long-term recoveries, some of which of that 20 some odd we have may not come back. We may lose 4, 5, 6, 7 off that injury list right now. They're not really included in the retirement piece. So we've got all of these variables and all of these assumptions we have to consider to answer your question. That 418, the injury number is factored into that.
So it is factored in. So it's not 418 is a safe level of folks who aren't injured, and it's accounting for there will be some injuries.
That would be, okay. I would make it easy. We'd say that's 418 sworn personnel.
Okay, great. And then my last question was, I was trying to understand the different rules because I know we have an OSHA requirement on 2 in and 2 out, and so I also know there's I think it's a union-based requirement of 4 on a rig. It's not an OSHA requirement though. So I was just trying to conceptualize if I am in my house and trapped in there and somebody calls 911 for a fire and a rig shows up with 3 firefighters on it, what do they do? Are they able to start right away, or do we have to wait for backup to arrive before they can go into a place, or how does that work? And then if they do have to wait, what's it going to take for us to get to 4 on a rig?
Committee Chair, Councilmember Johnson, according to letter of law to OSHA, in the 2 out 2 rule, if 3 showed up, what that really means for every 2 that go in, we need to have 2 outside. And that's basically for rescue of the firefighters. So letter of law, they would not probably initiate a fire attack. However, if there was imminent rescue that needed to be, probably say you were in a position you need to be rescued right now, they would probably make entry and conduct that rescue. I know that that's what would probably happen. Now that's why I front load incidents, because I'm forced to do that because of our staffing levels. I have to front load incidents, I got more fire trucks coming to an incident scene. That gets us to 4. That's how we're able to achieve that 14 on scene within 9 minutes and 20 seconds, which is another standard. We're doing that about 90% of the time. We're almost meeting that standard. But what I have to do is take other resources away from other parts of the city to make that happen. So when you show up with just 3, it is very challenging. Now, when we talk about that, I wouldn't expect to have 4 in every fire truck we have. I would just like to have, I think we need to be in a position that our most busiest companies, our most companies that are going to be, on average, are going to have those types of fires, have 4 on those rigs. Our busiest apparatus should be staffed adequately. Some of the stations that aren't as busy can certainly be maybe staffed a lesser, but it's very, very important. It's an important standard. Firefighter safety is the ultimate responsibility of mine.
But what I'm hearing is that they would go in, which is good. I want to be rescued in that kind of a situation, but they would be put at perhaps what one might say is unnecessary risk because they don't have a safe level to maintain sight lines and communications and such.
Yeah, Councilmember Johnson, we could be in violation of OSHA law. We could be under, it would have to be one have to be looked at, but it makes it very, very challenging.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Yang, you had a follow-up?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Chief, you talked about the 26 injuries in the past year, and is that a pretty high number relative to other years, or is that pretty, the number of injuries? The 26 that you cited, is that relatively the same, throughout the years, or is that pretty high?
No, we've seen, Councilmember Yang, we've seen a dramatic increase in injuries. It had just been a gradual increase as, you know, and as our injuries have gone up, so has our overtime, you know, and it just, the nature of this, it's the nature of our business. It's a very physically demanding job. And as an example, if crews would go to an EMS event and we have a bariatric patient, a patient that is very heavy, that weighs 400 pounds, 500 pounds, whatever, and you've got 3 individuals that need to lift this patient into an ambulance or on a gurney to be moved to an ambulance, I am amazed at how many injuries I'm seeing caused by those lifts and back injuries, and that's causing some long-term folks being off injured, and it's driving up our overtime. It is, and it's providing a function that we're doing it, and there's no cost recovery. We do all these EMS runs, and there's no cost recovery for us. So we are seeing a dramatic spike, and it's not only, and then you start plugging in the injuries we have in the fire grounds. All those types of injuries are really starting to increase, and we've got a committee working on wellness right now, safety and wellness, to come up with ways of talking about initiatives and lifting and movement and what we can do to be safer. We talk about it all the time. But it is a challenge, and we are seeing those numbers go up. Now, and would I say there's a direct correlation? I think there can be a correlation to staffing without question. You know, as staffing has gone, it just the facts just bear it out. As staffing has gone down, our numbers have gone up. You know, it's taken me a year. I would just like to get to 406. I'm just trying to get to there. It takes that long to get there. It just is, it's challenging for us. And for me, it's frustrating because I realize that there are additional costs associated with that. Those injuries not only come with the cost of rehab with overtime, but then we also have our workers' compensation costs that have escalated. I'd have to defer to Luke. Our first year was 1 point. And now we're at 2.4. It's doubled. Yes, our workers' compensation has doubled since I've been back as a fire chief to $2.4 million. There is just a lot of things that are attached to these things, and it is so frustrating trying to work through how do we fix it. We still have to go to EMS runs. We still have to go to fires. We still have to be, and our firefighters do a great job of being very aggressive. They're very safe, but they're very aggressive in what they do, and it's just that challenging of a profession that a lot of folks have a hard time understanding the challenges of that. And until you go out, and I know some of the legislators that were in town a few weeks ago went out and took the firefighter challenge put on by the fire unions. Then they really had an awakening when they realized, well, to your credit, Councilmember Quincy,
why is everybody looking at me?
went out there and did that. And I know that he realized that can really understand the physical demands and we have an aging workforce. You know, as we've gotten older, we have an aging workforce, and we're managing to whittle away at it. But we are, our workforce average age is late 40s. I mean, that's where we're at. We're in our late 40s, and we are very susceptible to injury. Now we are getting younger. With it, it's going to take time for us to overcome some of these. So,
thank you.
Thank you. Move on to community risk reduction and outreach. Another very important piece, especially I have to talk about. We're coming up here on Fire Prevention Week, and it's a very important time for the fire service to talk about fire prevention, some of the preventative measures that communities can take and individuals can take in fire safety and home fire safety. In our community risk reduction program, and I have to give her a shout out. I've got Cassie Anderson. She's a division of 1, assisted by obviously our firefighters, by one person who's our community outreach officer. She does a very, very effective job, assisted by our fire crews and our fire stations. We have since in the last year, we've sort of resurrected a little bit, if I use it as a term, in a community emergency response team issue that we had years ago. We developed the CERT teams, and that sort of fell by the wayside. It lost its funding. I felt when I was working in emergency management, when the tornado went through North Minneapolis, I thought that there was an opportunity that we had missed by not having those CERT teams to help with those community issues that come up in terms of of a potential disaster. So we have put that program back on board. We have got a large number of people who've been through training. It's a volunteer group that are very dedicated. We have a waiting list for another class from throughout this city that we're going to continue to grow and develop this team. I think there is a lot of not only emergency response teams, I think they can just be a community response team. I think there are a lot of things that go on within the community that a localized CERT team can assist with, whether it be community events, whether it be passing out literature, whether it be just doing a lot of things, checking on their neighbors. There's a lot of things that they can do. It would be a goal that I've had for a long time, but it would be just really unique, I think, if we had a community response team in and around each one of our 19 fire stations. So if we had a group of neighborhood residents who are committed to getting involved with CERT, and we could have 19 CERT teams using a fire station as their area to meet and to, if there was an issue within the community, to have someplace to rendezvous and then go out in their community and to assist. We will see how that goes. We're continuing to do that. We are working with coaching with organizations and providing them with prevention material and prevention education. We're focusing on, obviously, our school-age children and early interventions. We have a strong program. We've read to school-age children. Cassidy spent a lot of time in the schools. We have a smoke building that we pull out. It's a trailer that's a smokehouse that we pull out, and kids can actually experience that and hear the smoke alarms. We do provide warning equipment. One thing I'll add to this that I am going to be, during Fire Prevention Week, we are going to be doing a literature drop throughout some identified areas in Minneapolis, the near north side and south side. We are going to drop fire prevention information. Within that information, there'll be a letter from me that is going to, if persons or people living in buildings have a question about something in their facility or in their building or in their home, certainly can request a free home inspection by a firefighter crew by calling. We're going to set up the 311. They can call 311. A fire crew will come out and do a free home fire inspection. And this is, quite frankly, in reaction to me, from me, into the events that we had early this year and some of the tragic events we had in Minneapolis and the Colfax fire, the Cedar fire. I think it's important for us to push this education, push the fire prevention message. And it's a way for us to get engaged within that community, have our firefighters directly working with the community. So we would provide that service if folks were able to, receive that, want that inspection. Fire crews will come out and assist them in answering any questions they have. Again, we can see some of the measures in community outreach. And the leading cause of fire that we have is cooking. It's been cooking for years, and it still continues to be cooking. They say, a watch pot never boils, but I guarantee an unwatched pot will burn, and that happens a lot. And then that is a leading cause of our fires. We have many causes, but cooking still remains a leading cause of fires. If you look at some of the graphs on the next page, you can look at the number of Minneapolis kitchen fires we have had. When you want to measure the impact we've had, there's been a dramatic reduction from 2007 to 2014. We have had a reduction of that. I think that those types of fires, I think that it proves that this program works. It works that we're in the community. Is a service I think is very important for us to provide the community. And we're going to continue to focus on this. Probably our biggest, one of the biggest things that we can probably provide the community in terms of having impact on fire and EMS safety is education. Whether it be an EMS education event, a fire prevention education, educating the public is very, very important, which we continue to do, using the city's communication department also. This is one area, and I'm going to go back to our goals and values and of the city that community outreach, I feel, meets every single one of them. I think that we perfectly align with the service that we provide, and our missions that we have aligns itself very perfectly with the goals and values that are set forth within the city. How's the department doing? We are doing, I think we're small, but I think we're very effective. The SAFER we took advantage of a lot of opportunities. We had a SAFER grant that we received couple of years ago. We received a total of $1.7 million over 2 years to fund 6 firefighters' positions. At the end of that 2-year timeline, we still had some additional funding left over, so we made a request that we could still apply that, continue to apply all that funding. They allowed us an extension, so we were able to take advantage of all of that $1.7 million towards the reduction of costs and funding of 6 firefighters. The MBFTE fund is the Minnesota Board of Fire Training and Education. We have managed to lower our training costs by taking advantage of a state program that allows us to apply for reimbursement for the funding. When we train these firefighters in our recruit classes, we can not only apply for reimbursement for the labor costs of our captains, but also some of the training costs associated with training firefighters at the firefighter 1 and 2 level to meet the state certification standards. So we've taken advantage of that in this year of $105,000 so far, and we'll take more advantage during this next recruit class we have starting at the present time. We're working towards, and it's a challenging standard, we are in some areas of the NFPA standards, we are maintaining an effective level in terms of our getting firefighters on scene in 9 minutes or less. We still have some work to do within 5 minutes or less. That is still going to be a continuing challenge. Our high school program, I think, is something that is going to be very effective, and it's sort of a wait and see what happens. But I think it's worth the investment. It's worth our time to invest in our inner city youth. And of course, our Explorer program, which we are going to start in October of this year, make that announcement, start the recruitment process, and that will go from ages 14 to 18 or 14 to 21. And we will have to look at what kind of numbers we actually generate for that program. That could get to be very large. We're going to probably have to try to put a limit on that and maybe create a waiting list, whatever we have to do. Our crews this year have also completed, by the end of year end, by so far year to date, we've completed 2,556 building familiarizations. By year's end, I hope to be over 3,000 building familiarizations. Since we do not do commercial fire inspections, I have assigned each of our fire captains, they'll be required to do at least 36 familiarization inspections within their fire districts. And what those inspections do, I want those crews to go out in the station, look at buildings or structures and or facilities that may create unique challenges to their ability to effectively respond. And go into those facilities, meet with business owners or property owners and look at a plan, determine a plan. If they see some fire code violations, they are directly reported to the fire marshal, and he then transfers those to the appropriate inspector, which go out and have those violations corrected. It's a way that we can work with fire inspection services to get into as many buildings as we can to improve and try to enhance this inspection process. It is, and the 3,000 inspections that they're doing, that's over and above the 40,000 responses that they're also going to probably make this year. Apparatus, and our apparatus, this year we're working with Fleet. We've been able to take delivery of, I think we're at this point, we're taking delivery of 13 new engine companies. We've got a platform that is, a new platform that is coming. So we have, I first came back as fire chief, there was a gap in our rig replacement program. We've got that back on track, working with Fleet and Mr. Sharp's building and others over there. They've done a good job of assisting us and working us through the fleet issues that we've had. We took advantage of an opportunity to receive 240 Tempur-Pedic mattresses from the Tempur-Pedic company to put in our fire stations. So that's one of those things that we have to buy. We still have to buy the furniture. We have to give them some place to sleep and or to rest. And this was an opportunity we took advantage of, which was on our, so we moved it off our CARS program. And we realized $120,000 savings by working with, and other departments took advantage of the same thing, working for the very kind donation from Tempur-Pedic to many of the fire departments in the region. We will be replacing full replacement of all 65 of our AEDs in the next month. All those AEDs have now got to a point in their life expectancy where they need to be replaced, so we have to replace all 65 that we have. We will get that done. In terms of our capital asset replacement program, in our CARS program, we have $450,000 set aside for the replacement of our breathing apparatus. A typical breathing apparatus lasts about roughly 16 years, and that is a bit of a stretch, but we can maybe get 16 years out of those. Our breathing apparatus are coming up in that mark right now. It is going to be, they're going to have a replacement cost of approximately $1.1 million just to replace our breathing apparatus. Our bottles that they wear can no longer be hydro-tested. They've outlived their usefulness, so it's time to upgrade to the latest standard of breathing apparatus. So that is in our CARS program, along with our personal protective equipment, $108,000 for firefighting gear for our firefighters. As you can imagine, we go through a lot of gear annually. And not only do we have this in the program, but we also have an equipment line within our budget. So between the two, we try to meet the demands and needs of equipment as it starts to outlive its life expectancy. In the capital recommendation, it's very nice to be able to have 2 fire stations in the queue at this point. We have Fire Station 11, that is going to be located up northeast, and the question of how and when to replace Fire Station 1 downtown, which is located on 3rd and Portland, with all of the east side development that we have going on right down in downtown, and all of the townhouses and condominiums and all of the movement of people into the city to live in the downtown corridor. To include the North Loop area. That is how Station 1, what Station 1 looks like, where it's located, is going to be something that we'll be working with folks as this goes forward to determine the most effective place to put it, maybe in the same place. But it is a little fire station that is where horse-drawn fire apparatus responded out of, and it is going to it's become one of our busiest fire stations in the city. And that is certainly due to the development and the growth that we've seen in the downtown corridor. So it's an exciting time for our department to have those in the queue, and hopefully it will become funded. Year to year, our 2015 expenditure, we've had an increase of about 1.5%. In our overall budget, a lot of that increase is going to go to just pretty much cover some of our cost allocations that we have in terms of increases in our IT costs and fleet costs and maintenance costs and fuel costs. All those things come into play when we looking at the total overall budget. And I think I have the last. Anybody have any questions?
Councilmember Fry has a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Chief. Most of the questions that I had, Council Members Yang and Johnson already covered, but an analysis of the impact, 1, of workers' comp, and 2, the additional overtime hours compared with the additional staff increases would be really helpful. So if we see, an additional 20 staff would detract from the amount of expenses for workers' comp plus overtime, that would be really helpful, and I think a reasonable analysis as well. And the second question that I had was in regard to, I believe it would be Fire Station number 11, which also serves the University of Minnesota as well, I think.
We have Fire Station 19 over there also.
Okay.
They would respond to they do respond in terms of hazmat. And even on a fire response, they would respond.
So I don't know where I heard this, but it's my understanding that we get money, or the city of St. Paul gets some money from the state to cover the activities where they help the University of Minnesota, whereas the city of Minneapolis doesn't get that same money. Did I hear that from you, or did I hear? I honestly have no idea. And if not, if we aren't getting those monies, then that would certainly be a reasonable request for our IGR committee in the coming year.
Commissioner, Councilmember, in answer to your question,
you could say I'm wrong too. That could be.
I did do a study.
Okay.
I did study the Big Ten colleges, and I just wanted to see of all the Big Ten universities, how and what kind of fire service they have, number one, and do they provide funding to their local fire department. All of the Big Ten colleges provide some form of support to their local fire department. I don't have the exact figures in front of me, but I can be close. I believe that the city of Madison receives from the University of Wisconsin about, was it $3.5 million? is $3.5 million annually in support of their fire department. Iowa City, down in Iowa, they have a formula where they take the square footage of the city, and they take the square footage of the footprint of the campus. They have some formula, they put it together, and then they determine a value, and that is then reimbursable back to the city. Well, we are one of the few that do not, and I think years ago decisions were made and agreements made as to why that is. I'd be based on the building of new fire station 19, where it's at located, certainly before my time. But we are one of the few that do not.
Is St. Paul one of them that, do they get funding?
St. Paul does have a small contract. They provide service for the East Campus over in the, I believe in the Egg Campus area, which quite frankly might even be in Falcon Heights, and I'm not sure. I'd have to look at a map. So they are contracted by the university to provide some service. Chief Butler and myself have had conversations about that. I think there's an opportunity here that we can provide a level of service over there that we could probably have discussions about how that would look like, what that would look like. So we have a fire station on campus, and that we do have a lot of responses over there. When you've got 50,000, 60,000 students attending school, that is a little city in itself. So it also presents its challenges with the chem labs and with our hazmat team and the resource that we send over there. It certainly presents its challenges to us. So
Thank you.
You were correct in some of your assumptions that you had made.
Good. Councilmember Johnson?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I really liked what Councilmember Fry had to say about getting some sort of analysis. So I was wondering, can you, in the next week or two, email council members and let us know? And I understand that there's a lot of unknowns here around, exact numbers, but looking at workman's comp and looking at overtime, if we had options to increase staffing, how we might expect that to drop within a certain range. And also, if you could get back to us and let us know what number it would take for us to reasonably staff so that we're able to comply with those OSHA standards when crews first show up. That would be wonderful. Can you send that to us?
Committee Chair, Councilmember Johnson, we'll have that done by Friday. I think we can have that done by Friday, and we'll
Yes.
Chair, do you want me to send that to you, and you will then, or do I send it directly
I
to you?
think between Luke and Sandy, we may be able to figure out how to follow up on specific questions, compile a briefing book that will address those questions, and send it out from Finance Department to all members.
That's right. I'll just direct Luke to work with Sandy then to put that together, response to Councilmember Johnson's
Totally
request.
appropriate.
Yeah, and I'd appreciate, if you would send something to me on that. So thank you.
Good. Councilmember Yang.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Chief, let me get back to the university issue. So in this situation, you said that you'd done a study of the Big Ten colleges and what the universities contribute to the fire departments. And so you talked about Madison. What about the U of M? I mean, were there any numbers that you can share with us off the top of your head?
Committee Chair, Councilmember Yang, I believe, and somebody else may correct me who's got some more history than I might have, I believe there was probably an exchange for the property for New Station 19 at the time for service provided to the university. I'm not sure what that agreement looks like. Right now, there's no money exchange between us nor we just receive it. The city does not receive any revenue in terms of the service that we provide the university.
Okay, and this is a really basic question, but the U has police departments, and they don't have a fire department, right? I mean, we provide those services for them, right?
We provide that service for the university. That's correct.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good. Well, seeing no further questions, I just have to say, I think we've glossed over a pretty big bullet point there, budget surplus. It's a demonstration of extraordinary management and participation from our firefighters themselves and addressing those big issues and getting a handle on some of our big expenditures. The pay down on the CARS program is a tremendous way to budget, and it's been a great asset for you. So you can identify those long-term needs, and we can prepare for those in a budget process. So thank you all very much for your diligence and work, not only for the work you do every day on the rigs, but also on the financial management and the stewardship of our resources for the city and the taxpayers. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I think that concludes our business today for our budget hearings. I would like to highlight, of course, our next upcoming dates are going to be October 10th. We'll be meeting from 9 o'clock to 2 o'clock. Boy, that's a long day. I'll be with a variety of departments, including 311, neighborhood community relations, communications, emergency management, human resources, and the city coordinator's office, as well as the IGR department. So that's what we can look forward to on the 10th. And with nothing further, I think we'll just automatically receive and file these budget hearing presentations and look forward to our work on the 10th. So we are adjourned. Thank you.